Chapter 261. The scene was quiet and awkward. Even the old man, who was the leader of the Zhongli sword faction, did not expect him to give such an answer. He wanted to say something more, but he saw him tap his finger. A giant black sword appeared out of thin air. It came down from above everyone's heads. The old man felt a strong wind coming toward him. He felt a chill on his back. He quickly looked back and saw that the sky sword tower behind him had been hit. In the next moment, the sword pagoda that was originally towering into the clouds actually broke diagonally from the middle. This! The old man's face was pale. He quickly shouted, "Quick! Form the formation to welcome the elder." As soon as he finished speaking, 3 people immediately jumped down and quickly stood behind him. The 3 of them were not young. They all had white hair, but they were full of energy. The 4 of them each held a long sword. They were gold, silver, purple, and blue. They stood in a square, pointing to the sky. Zhong, Li, Qian, Block. With 4 shouts, 4 colors of light shot into the sky. It set off a scary power. It made the disciples around feel excited. They had been bullied, and they were angry. They were not strong enough, so they could only watch the strong enemy show off. But the actions of their leader and the 3 elders made them excited. Yes, we still have the elder. The legendary martial path god, the invincible elder. Suddenly, some people began to thank Gunan and Redtail. Thanks to these 2 guys, they could see the elder's power. "It's a welcoming spell formation," Redtail commented. Redtail commented from the side. "Divide the Dharma artifact into 4 and let the 4 transcendents operate it separately. That way, they can gather enough power to guide us." With Gunan's knowledge, he knew what a welcoming spell formation was. The astral realm also had something similar, but that was for the Tao Lords. They could not break the world, so they used this method to go around in circles to travel through space. As for the real-world breakers, they could manipulate space at will. They did not have to use this method. Through the scene in front of them, Gunan and Redtail could tell that the martial path god of the Crescent world did not have the basic characteristics of a world breaker. Maybe it is something between a super and a break world? I'd still like to see an actual example. Gunan's gaze didn't waver at all as he looked up calmly. There, the 4-colored light had completely converged into a single point, and a door of light had opened in the sky. A figure with a sword at his waist had impressively appeared. Zhongli Sword Faction's 398th generation unfilial disciple, Du Xian, respectfully welcomes the Patriarch's arrival. Among the 4 old men, the faction leader said in a clear voice. A commotion broke out among the crowd of disciples. "Patriarch, it really is the ancestral master. I've seen the portrait of the Patriarch." The silhouette in the air lightly stepped forward and suddenly appeared in front of the people of the Zhongli sword sect, directly facing Gunan and Yishiwen. This ancestor of the Zhongli sword sect had an extraordinary appearance. He clearly had the face of a young man, dressed in a snow-white robe, with a long sword hanging from his waist in a silver scabbard, simple yet elegant. More importantly, being at the pinnacle of the world all year round made his temperament extraordinary and refined. His entire person simply didn't look like a mortal. Therefore, the moment this ancestral master appeared on the stage, countless screams were heard. Zhongli Su won. The Patriarch held his sword and cupped his hands. He said his name and then said, "Mister, your reaction is too slow." The calm forward evaluation came from behind. It made Su Wen's words stick in his chest, and he subconsciously wanted to draw his sword. But his opponent's actions were faster than he expected. He was a swordsman, but he couldn't even draw his sword. His elbow joint felt a sharp pain. Catcha! Su Wen's right hand was grabbed, and his left hand was broken. It formed a 90-degree bend. It was very scary to look at. His fitness is close to break world class. Gunan continued to evaluate and then pushed Su Wen forward. Su Wen did not know what was going on, but he had relied on himself. He had killed his way to this level, so he was very strong. Seeing the bindings around him disappear, he did not have time to think. He used his uninjured right hand to draw his sword. In the time it took for a spark to fly, he stabbed Gunan's throat. "Your damage is much stronger than that of a normal leader," but you are not as strong as a break world class. Speed barely passes. Suwon did not have time to feel happy. He noticed that his opponent's voice was still calm. The sword that he stabbed his opponent only left a shallow white mark on his skin. It did not even break his skin. This, Suwon's current mood, could only be described as F***king dog. As for Gunnan's evaluation, it naturally entered into his ears, and the only sentence that could be considered to be a good evaluation was that his speed barely meets the standard. What did he mean by barely passed? There were less than 10 people in the world who had reached the imminent deity realm, and among them, his speed was his forte. But then he thought about what the person in front of him had just shown. The supernatural speed that ghosts and gods could not predict, and he did not think it was strange. Such a scary warrior. Was he the legendary break space level? Gunnan casually knocked away the long sword. He looked at Redtail and asked, "How is it?" Redtail was recording something with her head down. She shook her head and sighed. Martial Path Sky God is higher than the leader. He is not weaker than a break world class. According to my evaluation, if there are more than 4 of these people, a normal break world class will have to avoid them. She finally made this evaluation. Gunnan's continuous evaluation of Suwon earlier was, of course, not because he had nothing better to do. He was providing accurate information to Redtail to determine the true combat strength of illuminating martial arts. If Gunnan did this himself, he would not be able to do it well. He did not know how to evaluate. They were all at the level of one punch. In that case, let's clear them all. Gunnan nodded. Let Lan Si do it. There were 8 big sects here, which meant there were at least 8 Sky God Martial Path. Normal break world people could not deal with them. They had to clear them all before they could rebuild the white mist. Yes, Redtail was not surprised. She already knew how scary Lan Si was after leveling up. That strange power was something that even the top break world people could be affected by. Gunnan and Redtail talked as if there was no one else around. The disciples of the Zhongli Sword School, including the leader and the other 3, looked pale. That was because their leader, Suwon, was holding a sword with a serious face. He was looking forward. As for his left hand, it was still in that terrifying state of being bent upside down. Chapter 262. Suwon was indeed a smart man, or rather, no one who could stand at the top of the world would be an idiot. Suwon just happened to have this opportunity. Faced with someone who was far stronger than him, and was probably at the legendary level, Suwon chose to side with him without any hesitation. Although speaking in front of so many people was enough to destroy his image as an ancestor, Suwon looked young, but he was actually an old monster who had lived for hundreds of years. Why would he care about that? Protecting his own life and planning for the position and power of his sect was what he had to consider. Suwon's guess was right. If he hadn't said that, Gunnan would have already destroyed the Zhongli Sword sect and returned to the Holy Kingdom to ask Lan Si to come over. Now that Suwon expressed his intention to side with him, he indeed saved his sect. To rebuild the white fog in a small world with a slower flow of time, he had to borrow the power of the local natives. Apart from realm breakers, reincarnation was the only way to enter a small world of the world level. Although a Star Lord like Gunnan could bring people in, the number was obviously not enough to establish an organization. Therefore, Gunnan looked around and finally nodded. Okay. In the Holy Kingdom, Gunnan had already returned to the evil god's temple, while Lan Si temporarily stopped the dungeon raid and went to the Crescent World to help Redtail establish an organization. It was indeed a waste for her to join the dungeon with her current level 4 strength. After all, the Splendid World was only a low-level dungeon, and the highest level unlocked was only level 3. It didn't matter how strong she was. With 3 professional agents, the speed of clearing the dungeon was much faster. There were almost no obstacles in the first stage, and they quickly passed it. On the contrary, the later stages of the battle left the 3 of them stuck. Seeing Gunnan appear, a father and son who happened to come out of the dungeon hurriedly bowed and said, "Sir." The father and son were called Leichi and Leba. They didn't sound like father and son, but more like brothers. However, they were indeed father and son. Lei 7 looked like a middle-aged man with a worried look on his face. while A8 looked like a little boy in his teens with a similar build to Shadow Song. He was rather reserved when he bowed to Gunan. But as such a child, the level of doing the task completely crushes a rookie like Lan Si. While talent was a part of it, Leba's true age far surpassed Lan Si's. Leichi and Leba were not humans, but elemental beings. They were thunderstorm elementals, the elemental creatures that accompanied the Thunder Titans. When their strength reached the transcendent realm, they could already transform into human form. Gunan nodded lightly in response to the father and son's greetings. The evil god's palace was still very quiet. Next, it was Yin Xiao who came to see Gunan. Ever since the immortal demon world was taken by Gunan as a divine kingdom, the newly born source quickly stabilized, and the divine kingdom space no longer collapsed as often as before. Thus, the work of establishing the divine kingdom was once again carried out by Yin Xiao. When a natural disaster happened before, many people lost the chance to escape due to the city-state's restrictions. Yin Xiao stood next to Gunan and said, "Now that we're re-implementing the city-state system, there's a lot of resistance." Human nature determined that while society maintained a certain degree of centralization, it would definitely spread and radiate to the surroundings, be it in terms of population or industry. Therefore, a completely closed city-state system essentially went against the laws of nature. It had only been implemented because of Gunan's forceful pressure. "It's all right. Just do your best. There's no need to force too much." Gunan seemed especially easy to talk to this time. He actually did not take any forceful measures. Even Yin Xiao was rather surprised. From what she remembered, her teacher had always chosen to go on a killing spree when faced with such a situation. After killing half of those who were dissatisfied, the rest would naturally submit. Gunan smiled and said nothing more. Of course, he was not being kind. His divine power was one thing. But the real reason was that the divine kingdom had been established, and he would soon be able to obtain buildings to manage the people. Back then, he had set up a series of measures and even used the law of resurrection to manage the divine kingdom. That was because it was only level 4 back then. After reaching level 5, players essentially had to play the game of management. How could they possibly go and communicate with the people personally? As long as they had this, the city-state system did not need anyone to manage it at all. It could be done with a flick of a finger. With the shadow servants, resources were continuously transported to the evil god's temple. The resources needed by the market were already sufficient. It was not impossible to gather a second one. That's why everything depends on the accumulated points. The construction of the divine kingdom was being perfected step by step. Resources were constantly arriving. The Splendid World dungeon was also gradually conquered. The Crescent World had completely fallen into Gunan's hands, and a brand new white mist had been established. In the blink of an eye, another half a year had passed. As the Splendid World was cleared again, the points in the evil god's temple jumped to 10,000 again. Another 10,000. Let's follow the previous plan and choose the regional management platform as the second building. Gunan did not hesitate much and quickly made a decision. This was already his second 10,000 points. The resource market had long been established, and all kinds of basic resources had been interconnected. Choose target building, regional management platform. Requirements: 10,000 points, 500 units of wood for 100 units. As a long list was written on the evil god's temple, a large number of resources were deducted. An exquisite stone platform the size of a podium slowly appeared and was placed in front of Gunan. "Sir, what's this?" Lan Si had also witnessed this scene. This was not the first time she had seen a miracle, so she was not as surprised. Once you take a look outside. With the completion of the second building, Gunan was in a good mood and smiled faintly. He then ignored Lan Si and went to the regional management platform. The platform's surface was made of stone, but at this moment, it revealed a bright screen. It was like a top-notch high-tech product. On the screen was a map that could be zoomed in. It was the topographic map of the Divine Kingdom. It was also a level 0 regional management platform. It was unable to change the terrain, but it only had one function, and it was enough for Gunan to use now. Gunan randomly found the location of a city and then drew a circle on the screen, enclosing the city. A blood-red seal character appeared faintly around the circle. Lan Si was not in a hurry to go out. She was following behind Gu Nan and naturally saw this scene. She vaguely understood what Gu Nan meant, yet a feeling of absurdity couldn't help but surge out from her heart. She hurriedly flashed and tore open the space before her figure directly appeared above the city. Lan Si saw a scene that made her gasp in surprise. The golden light was like a cover, wrapping up the entire city and hovering quietly in the air along with a large area of the ground below. Chapter 263. AD on the title begins. AD on the title, Inch 1 Chapter 303 Life and Death Stone / H1 A Style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals 5622979. HTML, next chapter / add border equals 0, table border equals 0, align equals left, table border equals 0, align equals left, table border equals 0, align equals left, trtd / tar / table. The upheaval in the Divine Kingdom was still ongoing. One city after another was shrouded in golden light, like a giant golden egg being wrapped. The people in the city could not leave, and the people outside the city could not enter. Countless people stared at this scene, dumbfounded. Many people left the city and went to the wilderness, trying to find some resources that the city did not have, or to breathe fresh air. But in the end, they were separated forever. Lan Si silently returned to the evil god's palace, while Yin Xiaoxiao was already busy dealing with the situation. Gu Nan's sudden actions had brought her a lot of trouble. On the management platform, there were already 50 golden eggs in the east and west, looking spectacular. After an unknown amount of time, Yin Xiaoxiao walked back with a tired face. She had also become Gu Nan's oracle, and due to her special relationship with the Divine Kingdom, she could be considered as half the owner of this place, and had considerable privileges in management. Only Yin Xiaoxiao could manage such a huge Divine Kingdom in an orderly manner. But this time, even she was unable to do so. Teacher, close to 1/10 of the gods are in the wilderness, and most of them are warriors. Yin Xiaoxiao said, "Should we give them a chance?" "What chance? It's not like they can't survive in the wilderness." Gu Nan said indifferently, "In the future, you have to slowly get used to using the Divine Kingdom's buildings to manage and reduce contact with the gods. In the game in his previous life, the gods were just a bunch of numbers in the eyes of the players, and no one would be bored enough to talk to the gods. On the other hand, a butler like Yin Xiaoxiao would exist in every god kingdom. The enthusiasm of the players was short-lived, and it was unrealistic for the players to persevere in managing the Divine Kingdom. Therefore, a full-time butler was necessary. This was the significance of the oracles. Some of them were good at fighting, some were good at clearing dungeons, and some were good at management. Therefore, Gu Nan shifted his gaze to his building list. The third building that he was preparing to build was the Embassy of God. The Oracle Consulate was a building specially prepared for the oracles. Not only could it quickly heal the oracles' injuries, but it could also train their various abilities. At a high level, the oracle could even resurrect dead oracles. In the God Kingdom, the two buildings that could improve the strength of the gods and strengthen the combat power of the God Kingdom were the God Training Camp and the God Servant House. However, the evil god's temple was still level 0. Even if he took out the god servants, it wouldn't be of much use. It would be better to build the god's embassy first. Only by strengthening the oracle's power could he better earn points for Gu Nan. The progress in the Crescent World was very fast. Half a year had passed in the God Kingdom, and only half a month had passed in the main world. However, 3 years had passed in the Crescent World. With Lan Si's help to clean up the martial gods, and the Zhongli Sword sect taking the initiative to seek refuge, the reconstruction of the White Mist went very smoothly with the help of the local tyrant. In just 3 years, the martial gods in the Crescent World were basically wiped out, and they were only waiting for the Red Tail to unify and unify. Gu Nan was in charge of the Divine Kingdom, so he didn't miss out on any of this information. However, when his gaze fell on the Oracle Consulate, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. In the first column of the list of requirements, there was a bracket after 10,000 points. The words in the bracket were 10 units of life and death stone. Gunan had seen this scene many times. This was a random event during the construction of a building. Certain special materials could be used to replace points for the construction. Of course, the management of the God Kingdom wasn't all monotonous and boring. There were all kinds of random events that existed to enrich the playstyle of the players. In the early days of the God Kingdom, things like material swapping were very popular among the players. That was because everyone was short of points, so they wanted a trade. Life and Death Stone. Gunan said the unfamiliar name and frowned. With his knowledge, he was already familiar with most of the common materials. At least, there were few materials in the Star World that he didn't know about. Gunan thought for a while, but he couldn't remember anything about the Life and Death Stone. He asked the Red Tail, Guan Hongshun, and the others, but they couldn't find any clues. It really isn't something from the Star World. Gunan shook his head and took a step forward before his figure vanished from the evil god's palace. Purple Civ Sky. Ever since Gunan leveled up to level 5, he hadn't been there. Now, because of the Life and Death Stone, which he didn't know, he was back on this land. He was still in the Star World's door area. There was still a maid that Gunan was familiar with, but he didn't know her name. At the Break World level and above, there was a big gap between a cultivator and a normal person. They were like two different species. That was especially obvious when it came to their lifespans. For example, the maids that Gunan hired could only live for 100 or 200 years. They might not even be able to serve him for 50 years. Perhaps when Gunan went into seclusion, all he would see when he returned would be a pile of bones. Gunan quickly left. He went to the Star World's door hall. He wanted to find out more about the Life and Death Stone. When he left, he bumped into his old neighbor, Luo-1. Huh, Mr. Gunan? Long time no see. Luo-1 was happy to greet Gunan, even though it hadn't been long for a Break World person like him. Gunan nodded. After chatting with him for a bit, he asked about the Life and Death Stone. Life and Death Stone? That is a special product of Quiet Sky. Luo-1 was very knowledgeable, so he immediately said. While Luo-1 was explaining, Gunan slowly learned what the Life and Death Stone was. It was a crystal that was born with the law of life and death. Even in the Devata realms, it was a rare resource. The solitary destructive heaven was the only place that had a fixed supply of it. Perhaps other small planes produced it, but when they found out, they would be kept a secret. They would not announce it. Quiet Sky. Gunan touched his chin. He felt it was funny. If you remember correctly, Quiet Sky was Zhua's Star World. He didn't expect that after going around in a big circle, he would still be involved in this matter. This time, there was no way someone had planned it. It was just a coincidence. The God Kingdom's construction required resources. It was not something that outsiders could control. Gunan, do you need the Life and Death Stone? Luo-1 easily guessed Gunan's needs. He said, it is difficult to buy it with spirit stones. Recently, someone organized an invasion of Quiet Sky. Why don't you go and try your luck? He paused and said, do you remember the 7-Star Alliance who came to check last time? Their missions are quite reliable. They have the Star World's door as a guarantee. They don't have to worry about being attacked. Gunan nodded, indicating that he would consider his suggestion. He asked, what is the invasion of Quiet Sky? Chapter 264. Add on the title began. Add on the title in Dead 1 text chapter 3047 Alliance /H1A style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals iml. Next chapter /add a Bleelager border equals 0. Table border equals 0. Align equals left. Table border equals 0. Align equals left. Table border equals 0. Align equals left. TRTD/TR/table Luo-1's words surprised Gunan, but he quickly regained his composure. 4 world breakers. Their sights were no longer limited to one world or one place. They were looking at the entire world, especially elites like Luo-1, who were in Purple Civ Sky. The news of Zhuhua invading Astral World could be hidden from others at first, but as time went on, the news would leak. No matter if it was his subordinates' movements or Astral World's arrangements, they would be discovered sooner or later. Not to mention that Red didn't intend to hide this matter at all. As long as it was hidden from the public at first, as time dragged on, the targets of those who wanted to take advantage of the situation would change. Since the two sides were in a stalemate, of course, Silent Destruction Sky was more attractive. Astroworld was a big plane, but compared to Silent Destruction Sky, one of the strongest under the 13 skies, there was still a gap. Purple Civ Sky, 7-Star Alliance's base. Please wait a moment. The organization will send someone to review your application. A girl led Gunan into the hall and bowed respectfully. Gunan nodded and said nothing. He had already arrived at 7-Star Alliance and applied to join the operation against Silent Destruction Sky. Borrowing the organization's power was necessary. For a super big plane like Silent Destruction Sky, if Gunan went looking for the life and death stone himself, he might not even find it in a year. If 7-Star Alliance could first determine the location of the life and death stone, it would be much easier to snatch it. The so-called review was an internal assessment of 7-Star Alliance. They were going to invade a sky great world, so they had to be careful when choosing their team members. Gunan sat for a while, but the people from the 7-Star Alliance had yet to arrive. Instead, the girl brought another person in. He was a shy-looking big boy. He probably had the same purpose as Gunan for coming here at this time. The girl who led the way quickly left, leaving only Gunan and the boy in the hall. The boy didn't seem to be used to such an atmosphere, so he couldn't help but take the initiative to greet Gunan. "Hello, my name is Lu Weining." The boy stood up and said nervously. Gunan raised his head and looked at the boy with a feminine name. He nodded and said, "Gunan." Lu Weining seemed to relax a little and said with a smile, "Is Sire Gunan also here for Silent Destroyer Sky? Maybe we can become teammates." He still looked like a kid, but Gunan didn't think it was strange. If he grew up in a place like Purple Sky, it was not impossible for him to have a break world elite. The two of them did not have a chance to talk because a man and a woman were quickly approaching. They were wearing the uniforms of 7-Star Alliance. The two of them quickly came before Gunan and Lu Weining. The woman was the first to speak. No, I just got here. No, I just got here." Lu Weining quickly waved his hand. He suddenly revealed his childishness. The woman did not mind. She first introduced her name and briefly introduced her team situation. The woman's name was Jiang Tingwei, and the person next to her was her little brother, Jiang Zheng. Aside from the two of them, there was another permanent member of the team. To enter a big world as a team, the best number of people was 3 to 5. Due to Silent Destroyer Sky's reputation, they hoped to recruit 1 or 2 temporary members. "I need to test your power. This is my responsibility to the other members of the team. Please forgive me." Jiang Tingwei had a standard smile on her face. She did not look friendly, but she did not look disgusted. Lu Weining nodded. "Of course. Is this the place?" Jiang Tingwei was about to nod, but there was a commotion outside. 2 people rushed in. The woman who had been leading the way was behind them in a panic. "Mr. Su, you cannot go in." "Mr. Su? Su Yin?" Jiang Tingwei frowned and looked over. She knew this person, but they did not talk much. She did not expect to see him there that day. Jiang Tingwei gestured for the girl to step back. Su Yin excused himself and said, "Big sis Jiang, I brought you a good teammate today." As he spoke, he patted the man in black next to him. "My brother, you can call him Blackhawk. He is not weak. This time, our team is not interested in Silent Destroyer Sky. You guys are lucky." Jiang Tingwei's team wanted to go to Silent Destroyer Sky. That was no secret in 7-Star Alliance. First come, first served. Jiang Tingwei frowned. She pointed at Gunan and said calmly, "We only need 2 people. If they are not qualified, then we will consider your friend." Su Yin knew that Jiang Tingwei was a principled person, so he did not mind. Instead, he turned to look at Gunan and Lu Weining. 3 people, 2 spots. As long as he squeezed one out of the 2, it would be fine. The man called Black Hawk was expressionless. However, his gaze clearly fell on Lu Weining. Su Yin immediately understood. Gunan was dressed in ordinary clothes. There was not the slightest fluctuation of aura around him. However, how could he be an ordinary person if he could stand here? One look, and it was obvious that he would not be easy to deal with. In comparison, Lu Wenying, who was still immature, was a more suitable target. Su Yan laughed and said, "We cultivators have to rely on our strength to speak. Why don't Black Hawk and this little brother have a spar?" His words were naturally directed at Lu Wenying. The latter did not even think about it. He immediately said, "Okay." Lu Wenying's decisive reply stunned Su Yan, making him a little unsure of what to do next. Immature just meant that the other party was inexperienced. It did not mean that he was weak. Perhaps he was a disciple of a powerful faction that had just left the mountain to train. "Let's do it then." At this moment, Black Hawk spoke up. Seeing that Black Hawk had spoken, Su Yan naturally did not object. He looked at Jiang Tingwei and said, "Hee hee." They agreed to the spar. "Big sis Jiang won't interfere, right?" Jiang Tingwei still had a frown on her face. She hoped that Lu Wenying would not interfere. However, this was the other party's choice. She could only nod her head. Thus, the crowd retreated a little, leaving space for the black figure and Lu Wenying. It was just a simple spar. It was not a life-and-death battle, so they were not afraid of causing too much of a commotion. Before the spar began, Su Yan's expression changed slightly. He seemed to have received some information. He walked to Black Hawk's side. "My men have found some information." He whispered to Black Hawk. "This person is called Lu Wenying. There's no information on him. He might be a disciple of a powerful faction. For people like them, the absence of information was also a form of information. It could explain many things." Black Hawk nodded silently. "What about the other one?" "His name is Gunan. He lives in the public area. He should be from small dimension." Su Yan said quickly, "If things go south, we'll change our target and challenge him." Chapter 265. Inside the Seven-Star Alliance's base, the Black Hawk looked at his opponent calmly. This big boy was eager to fight. It was exactly what the two of them had guessed. Some big faction secretly trained him. He had break-world power, but he rarely participated in the world. That had to be it. Su Yan, who was watching from his side, thought his guess was correct. He suddenly said, "Wait." This shout came out of nowhere. Lu Wenying was already prepared to make a move, but he was stopped by Su Yan's shout. He immediately glared at Su Yan. It felt like he was about to sing karaoke when someone cut him off. Su Yan could not say anything to the Black Hawk, and he could not admit defeat. He had to use his own way to show his attitude. He had to set the stage. Su Yan walked in front of Gunan and said, "If that little brother accepted the challenge, then for fairness' sake, you have no reason to stay out of it. It does not matter if that little brother wins or if my friend is better. The loser should have a chance to challenge you." Su Yan's eyes looked at Gunan. It was as if he said no, everyone would be angry. Su Yan's words were very clever. He did not know who would lose, so it looked like he was speaking for both of them. It made him seem like he was being fair. When Lu Wenying heard this, he thought it made sense. He did not mind fighting, but there was no reason for a third person to take advantage of him. Noticing Lu Wenying's gaze, Su Yan felt a lot more at ease. As long as Lu Wenying acknowledged his words, then his preparations would be considered a success. No matter what Gunan's attitude was, he could not deny it. However, the other party's reaction was somewhat out of his expectations. Gunan frowned. He looked at Jiang Tingwei and asked, "You guys only need 2 people?" Jiang Tingwei acted as if she did not see the fighting in front of her. She calmly nodded and said, "Not bad. Our team only has 2 empty spots." "Okay," Gunan agreed. In front of Su Yan's shocked eyes, his body suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he had already appeared behind the Black Hawk, grabbed the latter's hair, and fiercely pressed the latter's head to the ground. How fast was Gunan? When he was level 4, Gunan was able to use his body to crush break-world people. Now that he was level 5, he was able to do the same thing. Black Hawk was a world breaker, but he felt his vision blur. His head started to fall. He was going to touch the ground. Bang! An incomparably horrifying, muffled sound rang out. Gunan clapped his hands and turned around to leave. Fresh blood flowed continuously from the ground, while the Black Hawk lay limply on the ground, motionless. "There are only 2 of us now," Gunan said to Jiang Tingwei. "Let's go. I'm in a hurry." Everything happened too quickly. Su Yan had only just recovered from the shock, and his eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. The Black Eagle was actually defeated in one blow. Su Yin looked at Gu Nan as if he was a monster, but he did not dare say a word. He quickly ran over to the Black Hawk to check on his wounds. Lu Weining was shocked, too. His eyes kept moving between Gu Nan and the Black Hawk. He was shocked by Gu Nan's brutality. Even Jiang Tingwei, who was always calm, could not help but look at Gu Nan with a weird expression. After a while, she said, "Please come with me." He had even forgotten about the test he was supposed to do. Clearly, this 7-star Alliance elite was not in a calm mood. Gu Nan and Lu Weining followed the Jiang siblings. They quickly reached the inner hall. There was already a girl waiting there. When she saw the 4 of them, she started to scream, "Big sister boss! Big sister boss!" The girl jumped up. She looked at Gu Nan and said, "Are they our new teammates? Hello, I'm Sidu Jing. Nice to meet you." The last sentence was directed at Gu Nan and Jiang Tingwei. This girl, named Sidu Jing, was not introverted at all. "Hi, hello, I'm Lu Weining." Lu Weining was obviously more shy in front of the girl. Gu Nan nodded and signed up. He then looked at Jiang Tingwei and asked, "When do we leave? If you two have no problems, you can leave immediately. The two from the astral world might change at any time." Jiang Tingwei said solemnly, "I've understood your needs and found a location." The astral world had been in a stalemate for too long. No one knew when there would be a change. A change in the minds of those 2 big shots could bring them the difference between life and death. "I'm fine with it." Lu Weining immediately expressed his position, and his eager expression reappeared. Of course, Gu Nan would not have any problems. After sharing the coordinates, the 5 of them immediately set off for the destructive sky. So this is the destructive sky. Sidu Jing did not expose the cleverness of the Break World elites. She looked up at the sky with interest. It is just like what is written in the books. The biggest feature of the destructive sky was that the sky, there was always black and white. Half of it was day, and the other half was night. It was very clear, and there was no gradual change. Every once in a while, the black and white would change, but it was also a sudden change. There was no middle. When Gu Nan saw this weird scene, he knew this was Zhua's astral world. The sky was split in half. Was it not like Zhua's herself? The destructive sky is divided into 16 areas. We are in the Clear Valley area. The ancient square castle in front of us is our target. Jiang Tingwei told everyone about the enemy. The ancient square castle was their target. There were items that each of the 3 parties needed. Gu Nan wanted the life and death stone. Lu Weining needed a special spring water called the Dead Spring. Jiang Tingwei's team of 3 wanted the head of a Break World elite. Jiang Tingwei did not just pick people randomly. She took care of the needs of all 3 parties. She made sure everyone was focused on one thing. She did not want to fight before the fight started. When Gu Nan and Sidu Jing were waiting, she was confirming all the information. There are 4 Break World elites guarding the ancient square castle, and there's a protection by Sima. Jiang Tingwei looked serious. She quietly said, "To take care of the needs of all 3 parties, the strategy is, I'm going to break the by Sima." Gu Nan interrupted her. "When the 4 Break World elites come out, you guys can sneak attack the target." Jiang Tingwei took a deep breath. According to what he said, there was no problem. If they could not kill the target with a sneak attack, the operation would be a joke. But Situ Jing was straightforward. He blurted out, "This is a Break World class protection by Sima. If we cannot break it, we will be alerting the enemy." Chapter 266. In the area where Gufang Castle was located, it was daytime in the silent sky. But in this broad daylight, a shadow suddenly appeared in the sky. Of course, it immediately alerted the guards in the castle. "Who is it?" A shout came from below. It was not polite to Gu Nan. A guy who showed up like this did not look like a good guy. And Gu Nan was not here to be a good guy. He rapidly descended, and then suddenly stopped at a certain moment. There was a thin barrier in front of him. Not far away, Sidu Jing did not know what was happening. He did not understand what Gu Nan was doing. Jiang Tingwei was staring at Gu Nan's movements. Lu Weining was doing the same thing. Jiang Zheng, who had not said a word, suddenly said, "His judgment of the Baisima's location is very accurate. He is not a cultivator who only practices his body." The protective Baisima was made up of rule power. If it was a pure body cultivator, they would not be able to find the Baisima's location. Let's see how strong he is. When Jiang Tingwei faced her little brother, her face looked a bit helpless. This time, we might be able to take advantage of him. Situ Jing could hear the hidden meaning in their conversation. When he looked over again, he saw Gu Nan's fist land on him. There was no loud noise like they had imagined, and there was no shocking power. The Baisima, which should have caused them a lot of trouble, was broken. He really is strong. Lu Weinian gasped, but he did not look sad. He looked at Gu Nan with a desire to fight. Get ready to fight. Jiang Tingwei's mind was still clear. She remembered the goal of the three of them. Sure enough, as soon as the barrier shattered, 4 figures appeared at the same time, surrounding Gu Nan tightly. Who are you? What hatred do you have against Gu Feng Castle? One of them asked coldly. Clearly, the Baisima broke too quickly. They did not even know what was going on. If they knew the Baisima was broken by a punch, none of them would have dared show up. After he said that, another Breakworld person's face changed. He clearly felt the space around him being torn apart, for shadows were moving at the same time. It wasn't just one enemy, but 5. Jiang Tingwei's team had 2 swords and 1 spear, and Lu Weinian had also attacked at the same time. Their target was the target that the other 3 wanted to kill. Lu Weinian's weapon was very strange. It was similar to Gu Nan's shadow sword, a long sword made of golden light. However, the shadow sword was developing in the direction of nomological materialization, while Lu Weinian's golden sword had the tendency to become substantial. One could even see extremely realistic metallic patterns on it. The Breakworld person was surrounded by the 4 of them. He was in a desperate situation, but the one who moved the fastest was not the 4 of them. It was Gu Nan. Almost at the same time the enemy spoke, Gu Nan grabbed the person next to him. He pulled him in front of him and punched him in the stomach. In front of everyone's shocked eyes, the poor Breakworld person did not even make a sound. His body was pierced. Gu Nan threw him into the air like he was throwing a dead dog. It wasn't just the enemy. Even Gu Nan's temporary teammates were shocked by how he killed the Breakworld person like he was killing a chicken. Situ Jing's long spear was bent a bit. Fortunately, their opponent was surrounded by 4 people. His escape route was completely blocked. Space was locked. He could only fight like a trapped beast. 1 punch killed a Breakworld person who could not react in time. Gu Nan's expression did not change. With his current power, bullying a Breakworld person was nothing to brag about. He was a Star Lord, even if it was like he did not have an astral world. In the blink of an eye, the Breakworld person who was surrounded by the 4 of them was fatally wounded. The Jiang family sister and brother's swords seemed to be a combination attack. They were able to inflict damage while keeping their opponents where they were. Situ Jing was the opposite. Her spear was not fast, but it was shockingly sharp. If it hit an enemy, it could inflict a scary wound. Their 3-man team was formed by relying on such a perfect complement. The opponent saw this too. He knew he could not stay. He bit his tongue and spat out some blood. It created a blood mist in front of him. The blood mist wrapped up the Jiang family sister and brother's swords. It created a chance for him to live. It was a chance he had to risk his life for. The person did not have time to think. He quickly tried to escape the encirclement, but he did not expect a gold light to be waiting for him. It was Lu Weinian. The golden sword light suddenly descended, bringing with it an incomparably domineering pressure, forcefully suppressing him. The Jiang family sister and brother's swords suddenly changed. They drew a strange pattern. It broke the opponent's protective rule. It created the best way for Situ Jing to kill. Situ Jing did not disappoint them. His great spear pierced through the enemy's chest and completely destroyed his internal organs. He could not be any more dead than he was. The 4 of them felt relieved. They looked to the side and saw another world breaker had fallen. Gu Nan was holding the last person and asking him what was going on. Where is the resource warehouse? Gu Nan's voice was very calm. It did not sound like he had just killed a few Breakworld people. Oomph. The other person coldly grunted. He looked disdainful. I have only achieved what I have today because of the leader. You want to kill Pang? Before he finished speaking, Gu Nan smashed his skull. If he did not want to say anything, it would have been fine. The warehouse would not have run away. They were not the only 4 Break World people who knew. Another Break World person died at the hands of Gunan. The 4 people stopped fighting. They looked at him strangely. The absolute power of Break World people had an upper limit. Even if some people were very strong, it was only because they had a special rule. It was like the Shanghai Pavilion leader, Yu Jiao, who died at the hands of Gunan. His curse rule was enough to make many elites of the same level feel helpless, but he had a weakness. However, Gunan seemed to have surpassed this limit, and he'd arrived at a completely different level from them. Jiang Tingwei looked at him. She did not think of a scary idea, but it was starting to appear in her heart. Lock down this area to prevent anyone from taking the resources and escaping, Gunan said emotionlessly. Let's go and see if there's a guide. Okay. Jiang Tingwei nodded. She was shocked at how careful Gunan was. She signaled for her brother to go and lock down the area. In the past, when they did things like plundering and looting, they never considered the small fry. Gunan was a veteran of many battles in the game. It was not easy to kill a boss, but the mission item was taken by a monster. He did not know how many times he had encountered such a scenario. Of course, he knew how to guard against that. The situation in Gufang Castle was better than they thought. Clearly, not everyone was so stubborn. They were not afraid of death. They had only just arrived, and people quickly came to join them. It was a person who called himself Wu Jing. He had been a manager in Gufang Castle, so he was familiar with the affairs of the castle. He led Gu Nan and the others to the resource warehouse. You seem to do this kind of thing often, Lu Weining asked with curiosity. Wu Jing smiled awkwardly. There are often wars in this region. The ancient square castle has changed owners a few times over the years. There are more people coming for resources. Facing 5 Break World people, Wu Jing, who was a super cultivator, was not nervous. It looked like he often encountered situations like this. The location of the resource warehouse was hidden, but there was no protection. If the enemy could fight in front of the warehouse, there was no point in protecting it. Wu Jing quickly handed a list to everyone. He took out the 2 mission items, the Dead Spring and the Life and Death Stones. We will take the extra resources to Purple Civ Sky and split them evenly. If we don't need them, we will exchange them for spirit crystals. Jiang Tingwei distributed the items skillfully. You guys check what you need. That's right. This is a high-quality Dead Spring. Lu Weining nodded with satisfaction. Gunan also had a pile of crystal-clear white crystals in front of him, but there was no joy on his face. The evil god temple had told him clearly that only a small portion of the life and death stones were of acceptable quality. Gunan picked out the life and death stones and found that there were at most 5 units. He was still short of half of what he needed. It would not be easy to make up for 10,000 points. Not enough. He shook his head and looked at Jiang Tingwei. Are there any higher quality life and death stones with more quantity? Not enough. Let me find, Jiang Tingwei said. Before she could reply, Wu Jing, who was next to her, said, Mister, do you need a top-quality life and death stone? There is one in the city. At the end of the month, there will be an auction to sell it for a high price. He saw that Gunan was not satisfied with the resources and was afraid that he would stay and plunder. So, he quickly came up with an idea. Okay, find someone to lead the way. Gunan nodded. Jiang Tingwei immediately said, Let's go together. We will use these resources to buy the life and death stone. If it is not enough, we will think of something else. Jiang Tingwei did not like to take advantage of her teammates. She believed that this was a 3-way cooperation. Now that both sides had achieved their goals, there was no reason to leave Gunan alone. In her opinion, it was a matter of course to take out these resources and use them as fund for the auction. Lu Weining did not have any doubts. He said firmly, That is how it should be. Chapter 267. After saying, I am not buying, the 4 of them were speechless. After Gunan got a guide, he did not want to go with them. He took his people and left. After looking at each other, Jiang Tingwei said, If Gunan can deal with this himself, let's go back to Purple Civ Sky. Her brother, Jiang Zheng, and Situ Jing followed her lead. Only Lu Weining frowned. But if we leave like this, we will be abandoning our teammates, seeing that he was in a difficult situation, Jiang Tingwei tried to convince him. With his power, I don't think we can help him. If we meet an opponent that is difficult to defeat, we might become a burden. Jiang Tingwei used the most important word, power, to convince Lu Weining. The four of them did not stay. They quickly returned to Purple Civ Sky. Things could change in Galaxy. If it was not necessary, they did not want to stay in Still Destruction Sky. Lu Weining left. In Jiang Tingwei's team of three, Sidu Jing, who was a bit more careless, did not think too much. He just left. Only the Jiang brother and sister were left. Do you think that Gu Nan is? Jiang Tingwei said with an uncertain tone. In front of her brother, Jiang Tingwei no longer had a square face. She looked worried, which was rare. Very few people knew that although Jiang Tingwei made the decisions for the team, the taciturn Jiang Zheng was the true brains. He can look down on break worlds, but he is not famous. I am afraid that is the only possibility. Jiang Zheng sighed. He is a planet master. Hearing the same answer from her brother, Jiang Tingwei was sure of her guess. Then she sighed. A planet master had walked right in front of them. If he had any bad intentions. Fortunately, it was over. It was just scary thinking about it. On the other side, after Lu Weining left Seven Star Alliance, he went to a remote temple. He asked the sloppy Taoist in front of him, Master, such a strong guy, where did he come from? Lu Weining was a bit naive, but he was not stupid. Now that he thought about it carefully, he could understand that Gu Nan's strength was a bit ridiculous and completely exceeded his expectations. After listening to Lu Weining's narration, the sloppy Taoist, whom he addressed as Master, also had a puzzled expression on his face. He stroked his beard hard and said, Gu Nan, Master, even you have not heard of it? I, your Master, am not an immortal. How can I know everyone in the world? The slovenly Taoist said grumpily, but his heart sank. At his level, he was even more aware that experts would not appear for no reason. The world was only so big, and almighty beings naturally had their roots. A super expert who had appeared out of nowhere. If he wasn't hiding his identity, then there was only one possibility left. Anyway, just don't provoke him. The Taoist priest said to his disciples solemnly. In the silent destroyer sky, Gu Nan had already arrived at the capital of the Clear Valley region and found a courtyard to stay in. For Break World elites and above, distance did not mean much. They could go anywhere they wanted, so there was no need to talk about going inside the plane. In order to find the coordinates of the capital, it took a lot of effort. A lady stood in front of Gu Nan and nervously said, Mister, the auction will start in 3 days. Her name was Long Xian. She had a pair of dragon horns on her head. She had the blood of a dragon. Wu Jing had given her to Gu Nan as a guide. Before this, Long Xian had been told how powerful Gu Nan was. Since she had been given away as a gift, she could not go back. In 3 days? Who is the organizer of the auction? Where do they put the auction items? Gu Nan asked. He did not want to get involved in the fight between Zwa and Red. He just wanted to get what he wanted and leave. If he could find out where the life and death stone was, he did not mind stealing it. If he could not afford it, it was better to just steal it. The silent destroyer sky was Zwa's territory. His faction reputation could not be leveled up, so he might as well make use of it. Long Xian was even more nervous. She stuttered, I heard it is a mysterious seller. They are holding an auction in 16 areas at the same time. They are all in the capital. It is a big deal. Even Gu Nan could not help but be slightly stunned. 16 areas were holding an auction at the same time. That meant they were spreading their influence across the entire silent destroyer sky. That was a big deal. To be able to do something like this without the public knowing the identity of the seller or where the item came from, the seller had to be special. Gu Nan shook his head. The identity of the seller did not matter to him. He only cared about the high-quality life and death stone. In that case, I will just wait. It is only 3 days. Even if he was in a hurry, Gu Nan could not wait for 3 days. Deep in space, in a small, remote place, Qian Han was in front of a table. He was wearing reading glasses. He was reading a file. With Qian Han's power, his eyesight was not damaged. This pair of reading glasses was a habit he had left behind in his early years. It was a habit he had when flipping through important documents. He changed the font and slowed down his reading speed to ensure that he did not miss out on any information. Gunan, what a scary young man. After an unknown amount of time, he took off his reading glasses and covered the file in front of him. He sighed. After returning from the Golden Giant tribe, Qianhan knew that he could not escape. He had to help them get rid of Gunan. If someone like Jin Wuyin wanted to kidnap him, he would have a way to find him. Therefore, Qianhan found a small dimension where time flowed very slowly and found out Gunan's past information bit by bit, then analyzed it word by word. It was such a detailed analysis that led Qianhan to a rather terrifying conclusion. Gunan's strength was definitely not as simple as what others saw. It was not as simple as just increasing his strength at an extremely fast pace. If one analyzed his every move since his debut, they would find that he always had a clear goal. He was like a sharp sword pointing at the enemy's weakness. It was just that his goal did not have any logical connection with improving his power. That was why people would overlook this. But when he put his experiences together, he could see that it was not a coincidence that this happened again and again. There is still one more thing missing. He seems to be able to improve his power from these unrelated things. What is it? Qianhan tapped his fingers. He could not help but think of Jin Wuyin. That's right, the Golden Giant. If there was anything in the world that he could not understand, wouldn't it be the alien tribe? Guna might really be a descendant of the Golden Giant. He might have accidentally awakened some strange talent in his tribe. That was why he could improve his power so quickly. As for those unrelated things, they were most likely the secret techniques of the Golden Giant tribe. The more Qianhan thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. He had already combed through Gunan's background. The only thing he lacked was the improvement of his power. The Golden Bloodline made up for it perfectly. At this moment, another piece of information was delivered to him. There was a red urgent symbol on top. Chapter 268. Qianhan had operated in many worlds for many years. He had an elite intelligence team that collected and analyzed all kinds of information for him. The information that the intelligence team gave him an A rating was basically confirmed to be true. Qianhan opened the information file and quickly scanned the contents. After a while, he could not help but feel excited. There was a 90% chance that the information was written about Gunan. He had suddenly appeared in Silent Destruction Sky and used his body to break the protective by Sima. Then, he had easily killed 4 world breakers. Plus, it was not difficult to find out the identities of the people who came with him. They were all world breakers from Purple Civ Sky. Hadn't Gunan appeared in Purple Civ Sky before? With Qianhan's shrewdness, he actually had the intention of showing joy on his face at this moment. It was really because Gunan's short but soul-stirring resume had brought him too much pressure. He was afraid that a person like Gunan, who had a clear goal, would not appear and participate in anything. He was afraid that he would disappear. As for the power that Gunan had displayed, he did not feel anything. Information from words was not as powerful as seeing it with his own eyes. Plus, Qianhan suspected that Gunan was of the Golden Giant race. Wasn't it normal for him to have a super strong fitness? Gunan's goal and whereabouts were not hidden from Wu Jing, so Qianhan knew. Life and Death Stone, the capital of the Clear Valley region. Qianhan smiled. His body slowly disappeared, and he quickly flew into outer space. 3 days was not a long time, but it was not a short time either. Gunan sat in the side courtyard. Soon, it was time for the auction to begin. In these 3 days, he kept asking for information about the auction, but there was still no information about the mysterious seller. He could not find out where the goods were stored. For an auction of this level, the auction items must have been secretly stored in other planes. When the auction began, they would be slowly transported to Silent Destruction Sky. That way, unless someone could rob it in front of countless elites, there was no need to worry about safety. As soon as the auction started, Gunan tore open the void and arrived at the scene. However, he had no intention of bringing the half-dragon girl with him, nor did he have any proof of entry. However, there was no chance for a cliché like being blocked from entering to happen. The person who could come in this way must be a world breaker. Did world breakers need proof to enter? Seeing Gunan arrive, Two people immediately came to greet him. After greeting him, they respectfully handed over a black number plate, and then one of them led Gunnan into the venue. Gunnan was led to a separate quiet room, which was clearly on the second floor of the venue. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see everything that was going on below. Not long after, the lights in the hall began to dim, all focused on the central booth. An enchanting woman with a graceful figure, but the lower half of her body was that of a snake, was twisting her waist as she walked onto the stage. Immediately, there was an uproar at the scene. The audience laughed and made a lot of noise. After all, there were only a few Breakworld elites. The main force of the auction was still a large number of superhumans. This snake-bodied woman was very famous. She was very popular. That is Lung Yidi. Wasn't she taken away by some big shot? Why is she an auctioneer here? Even if she was taken away, she could still spit it out. TSK, TSK. I really want to know who the seller of the auction is. How generous. Similar conversations kept coming. Most of them expressed their surprise at the power of the organizer of the auction. Lung Yidi was a popular person in the Clear Valley region. That was why she had come here. Naturally, the other regions also had similar candidates. This was an auction held by 16 regions at the same time. While people were constantly amazed at the seller's generosity, Lung Yidi, who was on the stage, finally opened her mouth with a smile. Seniors, fellow cultivators, welcome. There was nothing special at the beginning. Lung Yidi's voice was soft and sweet, with a strange sense of friction, which made people's hearts itch. Gunnan sat in a room on the second floor with no expression, looking down coldly. The opening was over, and the first auction item was slowly being brought up. However, this was not Gunnan's goal. According to the auction list, the life and death stone that he needed would be the fourth item on the stage. However, at this moment, he smelled a strange fragrance slowly drifting out of the room, and a shadow began to appear in front of him. It was a Buddha in a golden kasaya, bowing to him with both hands. Amitabha, benefactor, please go to hell. The auction was not going very fast, but the atmosphere was very lively. Lung Yidi was obviously an excellent auctioneer. She could not only stir up the atmosphere, but also prolong the auction to raise the price as much as possible. Therefore, the first three items had already been sold at sky-high prices. When the fourth item was about to be auctioned, the atmosphere at the scene reached its peak. Life and death stone. Life and death stone. Stop talking nonsense. Hurry up and bring the premium life and death stone. The first 3 rounds of auctions had completely heated up the atmosphere at the auction. Everyone below the stage was getting more and more immersed in the auction items. The life and death stone was a special product of the solitary destruction heaven, but this did not mean that the natives had no demand for it. On the contrary, the outside world would only use the life and death stone at special times. On the contrary, many natives were using it to practice or even create cultivation techniques, so the life and death stone had become their regular demand. Lung Yidi did not disappoint their enthusiasm. A crystal stone that was almost the size of a palm was slowly moved to the auction stage. The cheers below the stage became more and more enthusiastic. Lung Yidi did not read the auction speech. Instead, she covered her mouth and laughed softly. Let me tell everyone another piece of news. This time, the fourth item in the joint auction of the 16 territories is also the life and death stone. Her words made everyone confused, and even the noise became quieter. What did she mean by auctioning the life and death stone at the same time? On the stage, Lung Yidi's laughter continued, and she began to reveal a hint of coldness. The life and death stone. Of course, it is to be the array eye of the solitary destruction life and death spell. As soon as she finished speaking, endless blood-red light began to rise from the ground, and a monstrous killing intent engulfed the entire scene. The center where Lung Yidi stood was where the blood-red light was the densest. Only then did people realize that the 3 treasures that were auctioned earlier were also emitting blood-red light and automatically flew out from the hands of the 3 buyers. They were obviously auxiliary materials for the spell. This is a scam. This auction has been a scam from start to finish. Someone realized something was wrong, but his reaction seemed a bit slow. Solitary destruction life and death spell? Wasn't this an ancient formation? Now, there are people who can. The cultivators of solitary destruction sky had thought about the unknown origins of the sellers, but there were so many elites there. Who would have thought they would dare to do something like this? Someone started to question the stage. Lung Yidi, your family and sect are all here. What good is it for you to do this? Lung Yidi coldly laughed. Her seductive presence slowly faded. She put her hands together, and her body looked like it was in Zen. My Buddha is merciful. If you don't want to put down the butcher's knife, why don't you go to hell? Her words were cold and merciful at the same time. Two completely different presences appeared at the same time. The people below the stage could not answer. The blood-red light kept coming out from the ground. It affected their rule powers and swallowed their power. Some people started to look back at the second floor. The people sitting there were all break world characters. Would they just sit there and do nothing? Lung Yidi noticed what they were doing, but she did not do anything. She just coldly laughed. The break world people were their primary targets. Another big spell had been quietly activated to trap them. If everything went well, the break world people would all be trapped in the Buddha land. They just needed to put the life and death stone in the spell, and open the solitary destruction life and death spell. When Lung Yidi turned around, she was shocked to see a shadow standing next to her. He was playing with the life and death stone. Outside the endless space, a young lady was sitting on a black lotus. She was mumbling something. A shadow appeared in front of her. He quietly said, Buddha, something happened in solitary destruction sky. Someone broke through the Buddha land. Chapter 269. Buddha, Endless Buddhist Chants and Boundless Buddhist Lands. The entire auction venue seemed to have turned into a land of 10,000 Buddhas. There were countless Zen wills hidden in the space, and there seemed to be Buddhas and golden lotuses appearing in the surroundings. However, the background of this scene was a terrifying blood-red killing array. The blood-red light and the Zen were perfectly combined. In the entire universe, there was only one person who could do such a thing, the reincarnated young girl, Wu Guwei, who had turned from Buddha into a demon. No Return had been planning for a long time for the change in the solitary destruction sky. She knew the terrain very well, so she stepped into the place where the change took place. A familiar figure that she didn't want to see at all showed up in front of her. Lung Yidi was dumbfounded. Seeing that the life and death stone was taken away, she changed her expression. You are. Before she could finish speaking, she was stopped by an invisible force and gently pushed to the side. Of course, the gentle method came from No Return behind her. If it were Gunan, she would have been beheaded. Lung Yidi turned around in shock, only to see that it was No Return. She was so panicked that she didn't even know where to put her hands. She bowed and stared at No Return with glittering eyes like a pilgrim. You again? No Return seemed to be having a headache. She felt that every time she wanted to do something, she would run into this guy. Gunan had confirmed in his mind that the life and death stone in front of him met the requirements of the evil god's temple, both in terms of quality and quantity, so the temple of gods could be built. In a good mood, Gunan shook the life and death stone in his hand and replied, I need this. I heard that you have it, so I came. I want this. You have it, so I came to take it. This logic didn't seem out of place, so young girl No Return could accept it. She was already used to Gunan's style of doing things. But I use it to kill people. What about me if you take it away? No Return asked with a faint smile, but she couldn't stop looking at Gunan. Her power had been recovering very quickly. She had finally completely rebuilt her own laws and returned to the Star Lord level. She was looking for someone to test her power on. Between a Star Lord and a Break World class, there was no gap that could not be crossed. There was still a difference. This was especially true for a reincarnated old monster like young girl No Return. She had too many ways to make good use of her rank advantage. However, in the next moment, she realized that something was wrong. Gunan tilted his head, and his gaze suddenly became dangerous. Then, a strong gust of wind blew over. A simple punch went straight for the girl No Return's face. After reaching Tier 5, Gunan's evil god physique was no weaker than when he had activated his heavenly god physique. At most, He no longer had the imposing aura of a heavenly god. But his fist was fast, and No Return's reaction was not slow. Suddenly, 3 pairs of arms sprouted from her back, and 2 heads popped out from her left and right. 3 heads and 8 arms, the true form of innumerable Buddhas. However, her Buddha body was very weird. One of the heads was a Buddha, and the other was a demon. One looked calm and peaceful, and the other looked terrifying. Even the arms behind her were performing Buddhist hand gestures, and the other half was performing demonic true techniques. Facing Gunan's punch, No Return didn't hold back at all. 1,296 Buddhist and demonic true techniques overlapped, and she pressed her hands forward. Gunan's soul was so powerful that he had already seen this scene in his heart, but he didn't care and still punched forward. The fist and the palm collided, but there was no sound at all. The space around them collapsed, and wisps of darkness quickly spread out. Neither of them intended to control the aftermath, so the darkness that had only been there a moment ago spread to the entire scene in the blink of an eye. Hundreds of transcendents, including Lung Yi Dai, were crushed in a powder before they could even moan. The World Breakers were also struggling. The 2-star Lord Elites were fighting at full power. Just a shattered space was enough to destroy them. After a long time, the darkness finally disappeared. The feature of space breaking separated the two, but neither of them had the upper hand. However, No Return knew that the other party actually had the upper hand. He had used the power of laws to block the other party's attack, but the other party only used the power of his body. In terms of endurance, the other party still had the upper hand. Gunan didn't continue to attack. He had never been interested in an enemy who couldn't be killed with one punch and wouldn't gain anything even if he killed them. On the other hand, the girl No Return stood quietly on the side, looking at Gunan in disbelief. She wasn't like Qian Han, who spent his entire life breaking through the break world. She knew the difference between a Star Lord and a break world fighter. Even if he didn't deliberately use the power of laws, the feeling that his mind and rules were complete meant that he was a Star Lord. So, the girl No Return became silent. She looked at Gunan with hesitation. "You became a Star Lord?" "Yes." Gunan nodded casually, then turned around to leave. He even opened a crack in space. However, right at this moment, he stopped moving, because he noticed that this world was actually showing signs of collapse. On the other side of the sky, in the deepest part of Star World, Red's face was pale. Zwazwa was still standing in front of her. As the Superstar Lord in charge of Silent Sky, Zwazwa's power was above Red's. She was more than a little stronger. If they were 2-star lords with similar power, he would have been dragged out of Red Star World for a long time. But Zwazwa had used her own power to suppress Red in Star World for a few years. She had left the entire Star World in ruins. If it wasn't for Gunan's sudden appearance, perhaps Red would have completely fallen. Of course, if it weren't for Gunan, perhaps Zwazwa wouldn't have been able to find the fairy demon world, and she wouldn't have come back to Star World. Putting all of this aside, in Red's palace, there was a figure standing between Zwazwa and Red. She wore a blood-red windbreaker and was petite. It was Shadow Song. "My cute little brother. After so many years, you haven't changed at all." Shadow Song covered her mouth and laughed. There was no smile in her eyes, only a bone-deep, killing intent. The boy's side of Zwazwa became kinder, while the girl's side became more and more ferocious. She even began to laugh wildly. "You still dare to appear in front of me?" The two sides of his body seemed to become uncoordinated, and the two voices alternated. "You're just a fake, a defective product. I'm the most perfect one. What do you want to prove by coming here? Do you want to say that you've succeeded? Ridiculous, ridiculous. As long as I kill you." Zwazwa's voice began to separate. One moment it was bone-piercing, the next moment it was deep and gloomy. In the end, he returned to being an ordinary middle-aged man. Chapter 270. It's begun. Wu Gui's voice was calm, but there was a hint of melancholy in it. When faced with the collapse of a heaven-grade astral realm, even the young girl Wu Gui couldn't see it often. Beside her, the space that had collapsed during her battle with Gu didn't show any signs of healing. Instead, it continued to collapse. In the sky of silent destruction heaven, a faint image was projected. It was Red's palace. However, what he saw was Zwa's first-person perspective. It seemed that he had reached a critical juncture. The astral plane was almost on the verge of merging with him. Who are you? What are you afraid of? Do you really think no one knows? Question after question came out of Shadow Song's mouth. Zwa's expression became more and more distorted. Even her body began to twist. However, his voice remained the same as that of a middle-aged man. You know? Who knows? As long as I kill you. Shadow Song's face revealed a mocking smile. Listen to your voice. You can deceive the world, but can you deceive us? My dear father? As Shadow Song's voice fell, Zwa's movements suddenly froze. Then, as if she had gone mad, she roared, Kill! Kill you! I am Zwa. I am a master of silent destruction heaven. Or where is my power? In a certain corner of purple Civ heaven, Purple Will and Purple Lightning simultaneously sighed when they saw this. So it really is him. Only Red didn't care. She calmly stood up and spoke indifferently. Back then, at the final step of the fusion experiment, you were heavily injured and on the verge of death. Even your soul couldn't be preserved. So you separated your son and daughter and swapped half of their bodies. Then, you infused your own soul into the main body of your son's soul. But you didn't expect that the experiment you placed such high hopes on would still be stuck at the final step. For tens of thousands of years, you maintained this half-human, half-ghost state. You also didn't expect that the other half of the child you abandoned would spontaneously come together and fuse perfectly without the slightest bit of mutual rejection. Red was like a narrator who had nothing to do with herself. She told Zwa everything she had done in the past, but it was like the sharpest knife stabbing into Zwa's body. Red walked over to Shadow Song's side and gently stroked her blood-red hair. I gave her the blood ancestor's origin, allowing her to cleanse herself generation after generation. Finally, the parts that belonged to you were completely washed away. In silent destroyer heaven, young lady No Return revealed a look of realization. So Zwa and Zwa have always been two people. No wonder. After all, she was not one of the people involved in the incident that year, and her understanding of Zwa was not as deep as those people. It was only when he heard Red's explanation that he gradually understood what was going on. Zwa was indeed the one from back then. It was just that his body contained the souls of both father and son. The son was the primary, and the father was secondary. That was why he often acted abnormally. Wu Gue withdrew his various thoughts, only to discover that Gunan, who was beside him, was sizing up the surroundings and didn't seem surprised at all. Aren't you surprised? You already knew? She narrowed her eyes. If Gunan knew about this beforehand, then perhaps he knew what? Gunan looked at her in confusion, then reacted. Oh, you're talking about Zwa's. I'm not interested. Gunan used a firm "not interested" to block all of the girl's questions in the bottom of her heart. Gunan obviously wasn't interested in this sort of cutscene CG. He was busy observing the situation in silent destruction heavens. If this place really collapsed, it wouldn't be a bad idea to take it as a private dungeon. In the Divine Kingdom stage, players could do more and more things. Conquering other dungeons was one of them. But at this moment, the sky above their heads gradually split open again, and a ray of golden light gradually pierced through. Just by showing up, Zwa was forced to the edge of a cliff. Even his background was exposed. It was clear that his decision to kill Shadow Song was absolutely the right one. But on the other hand, Zwa was still the master of the stars. The entire situation wouldn't completely collapse just because of one sentence from Shadow Song. In reality, up until now, the initiative was still in his hands. As long as he could defeat the 10,000-year-old demon in his heart, he could still take back his power. My power? Zwa's two voices intertwined, sometimes young, sometimes mature. At this moment, he suddenly raised a hand and pierced it into his chest. In his chest, under the dense and complicated veins, there was clearly an alternating red and blue heart beating. And at this moment, the red part was completely stripped out. Shadow Song's gaze froze. She didn't expect him to destroy his core in order to obtain a moment of peace. This was cutting off all means of retreat. Zhua's surging aura gradually calmed down. His gaze also gradually calmed down. He looked ahead coldly. You have people in silent destruction heavens. He could clearly feel the power from the astral world rapidly weakening. Even the connection had become unstable. This is all thanks to you, Shadow Song sneered. If you hadn't stayed here for so many years, no return wouldn't have been able to set up so easily. Zhua stayed in the astral world to completely suppress Red, but at the same time, she had also neglected silent destruction heavens. So, it was her. Zhua nodded. He gently opened his palm, and the red and blue heart was instantly annihilated. Shadow Song and Red froze at the same time. They had thought that Zhua would go hysterical, counterattack in the face of death, and destroy indiscriminately. But they hadn't expected him to do this. This was suicide? Unlike other experts, Zhua's body was a fusion of two bodies. Once his core was destroyed, he would immediately fall apart. However, while they were still in a daze, an inexplicable fluctuation of nomological laws suddenly appeared behind Red. Red, who had been in a stalemate with Zhua for so many years and was already an arrow at the end of its flight, was instantly pierced through by this law, leaving a bloody wound on his chest. Shadow Song turned around in shock. Zhua's original body had already been annihilated, and behind Red, there were two bodies that had been split in half. These two have only had one side of each body, as if they had been cut in half by a sharp blade. What kind of law is this? Shadow Song stared at this scene in a daze. Even with her 10,000 years of experience, she couldn't recognize the origin of this strange scene. It was only at this moment that a clear and cold voice finally arrived. Life and death, left and right. This voice seemed to come out of nowhere, but Shadow Song suddenly turned around because she clearly recognized that this voice came from Zhua's female body. There's a third spirit. Who are you? Shadow Song finally realized that something was wrong. Everything had been too smooth, so smooth that it was unbelievable. Since Zhua already knew of her existence, would she not have held back? The woman who had obtained half of Zhua's body did not answer her, only moving her limbs. Zhua looked down at Red from above, finally revealing a victorious smile. The astral realm is such a good place. There are more geniuses than just that little fellow. You missed out on too many. Of course, Red's eyes were filled with surprise, but she mostly found it funny. You gave her half of your body. Do you think you can get it back? Zhua laughed loudly. I still have silent destructive heaven. What does she have to compete with me? Do you think that a single Buddha can completely destroy my astral realm? Even though it was a very weak connection, Zhua could clearly feel an astonishing aura of law descending on silent destructive heaven. Silent destructive heaven. Chapter 271. Golden light showered down. Jin Wuyin was like an invincible giant, descending with terrifying power. As the purest golden giant, Jin Wuyin could always remain in his original form. On the contrary, his usual human form was the result of him deliberately hiding it. Qianhan had a smile on his face as he stood quietly next to Jin Wuyin. He looked down at Gunan and the young girl. No return. No matter how cunning you are, you were still caught by this old man in the end. When it was time to collect the fruits of victory, even the shrewd Qianhan could not help but feel a little happy. He had indeed put in a lot of effort to find Gunan's whereabouts. A Star Master Golden Giant? No return frowned. Jin Wuyin used his full power, which allowed her to see through him. This made No Return a little confused. Since when were Star Masters so worthless? Why were they popping up one after another? Under normal circumstances, the probability of meeting a Star Lord was extremely small, even in the myriad heavens and realms. If extraordinaires stood at the peak of the mortal world, and world breakers had already left the mortal world, then Star Masters were on a completely different level. World breakers might need the power of the mortal world to do things for them and gather resources to improve, but Star Masters did not need that at all. Most of their energy was spent on the inner world, looking for a suitable astral world in the starry path. In other words, Star Masters paid attention to the world itself, not the people living in it. "You are Gunan?" As soon as Jin Wuyin appeared, a thunderous voice came, followed by his fist. Although he asked, his hands did not slow down at all. Gunan did not stop. He punched back without hesitation. He even leaped forward, heading straight for Jin Wuyin. "Golden Giant, you came at the right time." Gunan was a little happy that Jin Wuyin had come to him. This was not the first time he met young Master Jin. Back then, he was busy building his god nation. There were many things waiting to be done, so he did not care about anything else. But now, the foundation of Gunan's god nation was complete. He had a stable source of resources and points, so he had more energy to think about other things. For example, outside the universe, or some alien races that were suitable to be subdued as god messengers. Fist against fist. Just how strong was Gunan's Tier 5 evil god body? Even with young girl, no Gue's Buddha, Tao, golden body, she couldn't resist it with just her body alone. She had to hand over the Buddha demon true intent to barely resist it. As the leader of the Golden Giant tribe, Jin Wuyin's body was his strongest weapon. Unlike the clash between the two fists, this time the two fists collided with a deafening explosion. Then, both of them took a step back. When their feet landed on the ground, they actually created two deep pits in the ground and kicked up a cloud of dust. This punch was a solid collision. It was not a matter of destroying the laws. The terrifying power caused both sides to suffer serious injuries. Gunan's right hand was almost completely broken, the white bone poking out from his elbow. Jin Wuyin was not in a better state. His hand was a mess of blood and flesh, and his wrist was broken at a weird angle. "You're definitely not from my Golden Giant tribe. Who are you?" Jin Wuyin's right hand was shaking. He couldn't hide the shock in his heart as he shouted. He had thought that Gu Nan was a descendant of his tribe who wanted to subdue him and bring him back, so he hadn't used his full strength. But even if he hadn't used his full strength, it was impossible for anyone to fight with him to this extent without revealing their true form. Unless the other party wasn't from the Golden Giant tribe at all. Gunan's right hand was recovering rapidly. In the blink of an eye, his bones had completely recovered, and his skin was also growing back quickly. This caused Jin Wuyin, who had a hard time recovering from his injuries, to stare so wide that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. For a race like him, the stronger their body, the longer it would take for them to recover from their injuries. On the other hand, there was no such restriction if one's strength was boosted by various methods. "Golden Giant tribe, are you interested in becoming my god envoy?" Gunan asked with a faint smile. He didn't hesitate and immediately tapped on a law. He knew that Jin Wuyin hadn't used his full strength just now, and it would be quite troublesome to deal with him under normal circumstances. So he used a skill without hesitation, Deity Descending. Deity Descending enhanced by Shadow. Wisps of black light shone from Gunan's back, and an incomparably majestic and cold aura seeped out bit by bit, almost enveloping the entire world. The young girl, no return, stared at this scene in a daze. The Azura half behind her suddenly jumped, showing signs of breaking free from her control. She had originally been watching the battle from the side, but Gunan's sudden appearance and the crazily surging gloominess almost triggered her devil intent. The terrifying black fog continued to surge out, almost enveloping Gunan's entire body. His body quickly swelled up, and his body was also cleansed into a dark color. His originally pitch-black pupils were also tinged with a hint of purple, and the black fog around his body slowly gathered behind him, turning into pairs of bone wings. There were exactly 12 wings, and he looked frighteningly ferocious. After this transformation, even Gu Nin couldn't recognize himself. He looked back in surprise. "What is this? A 12-winged bone angel?" Even in the game in his previous life, there weren't many people who could use the deity rule. This thing required a lot of investment in the early stages and had a long cooldown. It was a 5-second real man type of skill, and not everyone liked to use it. And after Gu Nan advanced to the 5th level, and with the support of Shadow Power, even Gu Nan couldn't predict what his current deity state would be like. But he soon knew the answer, because Jean Wuyin and the young girl, No Return, almost at the same time, blurted out, "Nine Serenities, heavenly demon." The nine skies were the heavens, and the nine serenities were the earth. Shadow power was originally of the dark attribute, and the deity that was originally above the nine skies, after being controlled by the shadows, naturally fell into the nine serenities and became a demon. In the original records of the world, the nine serenities' heavenly demon was exactly what Gunan looked like now. Heavenly demon. Of course, Gunan heard what the two called him. He looked at his dark purple skin and felt the power of the 12 wings behind him, tacitly agreeing to this name. The young girl, No Return, took a step back without a trace. This situation had already exceeded her expectations, but it also explained the doubts she had all along. Gunan's speed of advancement was actually faster than her own strength recovery. How is this possible? So he was the reincarnation of a heavenly demon. Now that he had returned to the Star-Lord level, he could finally display the power of his previous life. With this thought in her mind, one doubt after another seemed to have been answered at the same time. No Return sized up Gunan with a deep gaze. Jean Wuyin's mouth was already twitching. He wanted to escape, but found that the space around him had already been frozen by the omnipresent majestic aura, and there was no way to escape. In this situation, he didn't say anything, but turned around and ran back. The space was locked, but at least his incomparably strong body could still move. Chapter 272. Golden Giant, Nine Underworld Heavenly Demon, who was in the astral realm, felt the aura coming from her own astral realm, and her mouth began to twitch. Why did all these things, which were usually not seen even once in a few hundred years, suddenly appear at this critical juncture? Even if they were locked in a fierce battle and had no intention of working together to snatch the destructive skies, just the aftermath of their battle was enough to affect her. Her astral realm, which already had a weak connection with her, could no longer receive any power. Who only had half of her body left, swept her gaze over the three women beside her, and her expression became more and more solemn. Gunyan, who had sacrificed the other half of her body to revive her with a unique law, was naturally her enemy, and they would fight over the remaining body. Red and Shadow Song were even more so. In short, everyone here was her enemy. Then, let's fight. In the destructive skies, Gunan, who had transformed into a heavenly demon, attacked casually, and Qianhan's entire body was directly locked down, and all the laws were instantly shattered. Gunan had already discovered that the strongest aspect of his heavenly god or heavenly demon state was not his own power, but his ability to naturally lock down space. Back then, in order to lock down Yu Jiu's escape route, Wu Guwei had expended a lot of effort to create a temporary spatial lock with the Buddhist kingdom. But after Gunan activated his heavenly god law, the heavenly god's aura had the ability to break through laws, and it was enough to completely solidify space. Because of this, Qianhan had no chance of escaping, and Jean Wuyin could only rely on his legs to escape. Do you think you can escape? Gunan looked at Jean Wuyin, who was about to disappear from his sight, and only laughed coldly. He took a step forward and instantly appeared behind Jean Wuyin. Jean Wuyin turned back in shock, wondering why Gunan could still open up space. Since space itself was solidified, Gunan should not be able to use it. The next moment, he understood that this was not teleportation, but pure speed. Even more terrifying speed was yet to come. Without Jean Wuyin noticing, Gunan's fist had already landed on his face, and he instantly fell to the ground. Gunan's heavenly demon body was also completely composed of laws. Not only did his fists carry a terrifying force, but they also contained countless laws of the netherworld. Corrosion, dissolution, weathering, disintegration. Layers of vicious yet highly effective laws of nature kept appearing on Jean Wuyin's face. The Golden Giant's powerful body seemed to have become a testing machine for the laws, testing the strength of these laws. Jean Wuyin was directly knocked down by this punch, and there were even signs that his face was fractured. For a moment, it was difficult for him to get up, and so he was punched repeatedly by Gunan. Gunan already discovered that his heavenly deity law after advancing to rank 5 had some changes again. At the 4th level, it still focused on strengthening the body, but at the 5th level, deity's descent, it seemed to focus more on the damage of the laws attached to the attacks. With Gunan's rich experience, he understood in the blink of an eye what was going on. His current diabolic body had already reached the limits of the first job transition. The first job transition was a threshold, and before one crossed this threshold, there was a limit to one's power. The power of the heavenly God could only be manifested in the aspect of laws. But in other words, this also meant that the strength of Gunan's current body, excluding those star lords with astral realms, was already at the peak. Jin Wuyin was a golden giant after all. Even though he was completely powerless against Gunan, he did not have any intention of giving up. He took advantage of a gap in Gunan's attack and finally managed to block a punch. Then, he turned around and fled. Even though he was already covered in injuries, he still did not give up hope. This guy had caused such a huge commotion. Why hadn't the Star Lord of this world come out yet? Hey, your home is about to be destroyed by someone. As Jin Wuyin fled frantically, he cursed the useless Star Lord in his heart. He, who had lived in outer space for a long time, really did not know what was happening in the world. Zuozua, who had been scolded by Jin Wuyin as the useless Star Lord, was in an even worse situation than him. He only had half a body left, and he only had half of his power left. He could not get any help from still destructive sky, so he was in grave danger. Fortunately, among his opponents, Gunyan was not familiar with his new identity. Hong Gang had been injured by a sneak attack, and Shadow Song had just recovered his break world power. It was this old, weak, sick, and disabled trio that gave Zuozua a chance to survive. Zuozua, under the combined attacks of the three, suddenly stopped. A black shadow appeared in front of him, blocking the attacks of the three. He then tore space and stepped inside. He did not even want his other half. He turned around and ran. Gunyan did not even think. He followed him into the space crack. Shadow Song frowned. He gnashed his teeth and wanted to follow, but Red stopped him. Let him go. Red's face was very pale, but her voice was very calm. Let's destroy still destructive sky and let them fight. Shadow Song's eyes brightened. He understood what Red meant. A body could not be separated for long. Between Gunyan and Zuozua, only one could survive. They were natural enemies. If they controlled still destructive sky and did not give Zuozua any extra help, they would both be hurt. In still destructive sky, Jin Wuyin's body was close to breaking down. He could only run for a few hits, but he could not outrun Gunan's scary speed. The Gold Leader was very good at taking hits. Even though his body was covered in rule powers, and he was breathing more than he was breathing, he was still able to speak. Mister, the Gold Race has no grudge against you. He looked like he was admitting defeat, but before he could finish, Gunan's fist came down again. That punch was like a qualitative change. It made Jin Wuyin's head tilt. His neck twisted at a weird angle. In the next moment, an endless darkness came out of Gunan's body. It crazily swallowed Jin Wuyin. Aren't you going to let him live? The young girl, No Return, had arrived at his side. I want to see the Gold Giant race. I only need one to lead the way. Gunan pointed at Qian Han, who was still chained up. Since he was interested in the gold race, he obviously could not let their leader live. He did not need a leader with a lot of authority. What a pity, Zuozua is not dead. Gunan shook his head again. If the Star Lord was not dead, no one could take away the Star World unless they could find the world's origin. In still destructive sky, this was a huge project. Moreover, if Zuozua was defeated, there would be many people interested in still destructive sky. Perhaps there was already a fight in the all-heaven star path. If the origin was taken away, it would be like drawing water with a sieve. Gunan still maintained his sky demon form. After reaching the 5th stage, even his transformation time seemed to have increased. He picked up Qian Han and planned to return to God Nation. Can you leave this person to me? A voice came from the horizon. It was Red and Shadow Song. I can provide you the location of the Gold Giant race. Qian Han looked at Red from afar. His eyes were filled with despair. Red's voice was no different from before. It was the same as when Gu-nan first met her. However, Gu-nan was no longer the same person as before. Why? Gu-nan placed Qian Han beside him and asked. Red calmly said, "He betrayed me and knows some of my secrets. I will not let him live." Chapter 273. Red looked at Gu-nan quietly, not saying a word. She was someone who had become a Star Lord 10,000 years ago. In these 10,000 years, there probably wasn't a second person who spoke to her like this. But the reason was very simple. She had to pay to take something, unless she was like Gu-nan and killed the seller. Even though Gu Wei and Jin Wuyin could recognize the Nine Serenity's heavenly demon, so Red naturally wasn't unfamiliar with it. She knew better than anyone that this heavenly demon wasn't Gu-nan's original body. It was at most an ability. She had seen with her own eyes that Gu-nan had transformed into a heavenly god. With this state, Gu-nan naturally couldn't be the reincarnation of some heavenly demon. It was because of this understanding that Red didn't understand Gu-nan's current attitude. Anyone with the slightest bit of foresight would understand that using Qian Han to get on her good side was the best choice. Even if he had suggested using an insignificant Qian Han in exchange for the benefits of the solitary destructive skies and the astral realm, she might have agreed. Why was he so obsessed with Qian Han? Gu-nan stared back at Red without flinching, even though he knew that he was still before his first-class advancement and couldn't fight Red head-on for the time being. There was no such thing as spitting out the things that the players had eaten. Then let's try. Red obviously wouldn't say things like, "What do you want?" and directly chose to attack. With her status, she had never compromised even when facing Zhuozhua. So how could she give in to Gu-nan? An indescribable fluctuation of precepts appeared around Gu-nan and surged madly towards him. What entered Gu-nan's eyes was a red that seemed to drown the entire world, an overwhelming red that couldn't be concealed at all. Red's law was red. Shadow Song stood next to Red and watched as Gu-nan was instantly drowned in red. He couldn't help but wonder. He was dealt with so easily? This doesn't seem real. She and Red could barely be considered contemporaries, so she knew very well how terrifying this move of hers was. Very few of the enemies who were trapped by her blood could escape. This red screen wasn't an ordinary technique. It was an abstraction of Red's origin law, and it was almost completely materialized. There weren't many people in the All Heavens world who could materialize laws with their own strength. However, based on her understanding of Gu-nan, she felt that he wouldn't be killed so easily. It's not that easy. Red's voice was still calm, but there was a hint of surprise in it. Only those who had personally fought with Gu-nan knew how difficult this fellow was to deal with. In her perception, the blood that enveloped Gu-nan was being torn apart at an incredible speed, and she had almost no time to replenish it. It could actually tear apart the laws. What kind of monster was this? Red had never seen a heavenly demon of the ninth underworld, but she was sure that a heavenly demon would never have such an ability. Surrounded by the red curtain, Gu-nan's body emitted a thick black light, but the red light kept pressing down on him. Gu-nan was using the stupidest method to break it. He was using his body alone to disperse the red light, punch after punch. According to Gu-nan's estimation, Red's grade was between level 7 and level 8. However, because she had been suppressed in the astral realm for several years, she couldn't unleash her full strength. She was only using her own strength now. However, her own strength alone was enough to suppress Gu-nan's rank, rendering most of his laws ineffective. Materialized laws were like the hardest steel and the most pliable satin. They were both hard and flexible at the same time, and they were extremely difficult to destroy. If he wanted to challenge someone of a higher rank, he could only rely on an extremely strong body. The heavenly demon showed no signs of dissipating. This allowed Gu-nan to fight faster and faster, and the more he fought, the more unscrupulous he became. In the end, he was using both his hands and feet, and even his entire body had become a weapon. The red light continued to invade. This kind of omnipresent enemy might make people feel despair, but Gu-nan couldn't be more welcoming. This was because he didn't need to make any judgments, and any random punch or kick would land on the spot. Bang! there was the sound of a bubble bursting. The speed at which Red created the red curtain couldn't keep up with Gunan's attacks, and the red curtain was completely pierced through. Under Shadow Song's dumbfounded gaze, Gunan's entire body was covered in black mist, as if he were on fire. He rushed out of the red mist, and then like a sharp arrow, he shot straight at Shadow Song. Shadow Song shouldn't have been able to see his movements clearly, but time seemed to slow down, allowing Gunan to draw a trajectory in her eyes. He broke free from the blood curtain and then punched right in front of Red. Red looked up. Ripples appeared in front of her, and the red light lingered in front of her like a shield, blocking Gunan's fist. Gunan didn't even think about it. His figure instantly appeared in another direction, and he kicked out again. The same ripples appeared once more. A third punch, a fourth kick. They looked like useless attacks, but Gunan was enjoying it. His movements became faster and faster, without the slightest pause. In Shadow Song's eyes, it was as if Gunan had transformed into countless bodies, attacking from all directions at the same time. As a result, the two of them were surrounded by the red ripples. "Go!" A soft shout sounded in her ear. Shadow Song turned around in shock, only to see that Red had opened a spatial passage at some point and was about to return to the astral world. Shadow Song felt a chill down her back and immediately understood what she meant. She hurriedly stepped into the passage and then heard a soft sound. One of the red shields had been shattered. This time, Shadow Song was really shocked. She had known Red for so many years, and she had never heard of a materialized rule being directly shattered by someone. Gunan's figure pounced forward again, a crazy smile on his face. The black mist around him became even more unbridled, and this expression seemed to speak of his momentum. The momentum to shatter everything. Red frowned slightly and waved her hand to send Shadow Song away. She then waved her hand to block Gunan's fist, and a glowing red light lit up on her hand. "Kacha!" Red's light abruptly paused, and Red's expression stiffened. She clearly felt a strange force pass through her arm, and it actually broke her left hand. Fortunately, Red borrowed this force to escape, and she directly crashed into the spatial passage, making it impossible for Gunan to catch up. As for Gunan, he stood next to the pitch-black crack, watching the two of them leave, but he only revealed a cold smile. The shadow heavenly demon state had already been pushed to the extreme, and now it slowly dissipated, revealing his original appearance. When he turned his head again, there was no trace of No Gue, and only Qian Han was left. Qian Han, this old man, had no intention of running away, because after witnessing the battle just now, he had found his value. "Sir," Qian Han revealed a humble smile. "This old man has managed the astral world for 1,000 years. As long as Sir is interested in the astral world, this old man is willing to serve Sir." Chapter 274. Star World. Red brought Shadow Song back. Then she started coughing. The wound that Zwa had pierced earlier started to bleed again. "How are you?" Shadow Song hurriedly supported her and said in bewilderment, "Gunan can already fight with you? Did he find the Star World?" Red shook her head. "I don't know about the Star World, but without the support of the Star World, I can't do anything to his sky demon true body. I was too careless." When she couldn't get the power of the Star World, she was just a stronger Star Master. She wanted to use her own power to suppress Gunan, but she didn't expect to be suppressed by him. "He fought very smart," Red said. "He must have seen through me. That's why he fought like this." Shadow Song's eyes were filled with confusion. She really couldn't associate Gunan's crazed look with brilliant tactics. But no matter what, she understood one thing. Gunan used the situation of the Star World to defeat Red. Next time it won't be like this." Red sighed. Silent Destroyer Sky. Qian Han's face was full of sincerity. He didn't look forced. It wasn't because he was good at acting. He really wanted to rely on Gunan. At least for now. This wasn't the first time he did something like this. After betraying Red and becoming a guide for Zwa, Qian Han had no place in the Star World. Relying on Gunan was his only option. "What use do you have?" Gunan asked. Such a question sounded like a taunt, but Gunan was indeed asking. Red wasn't willing to pay, so whether or not Qian Han could keep his life depended on himself. Qian Han didn't even think. He quickly said, "Mister, I am a top world breaker. I am very familiar with the star world. I understand all the worlds." After a pause, he continued, "For the past 1,000 years, the astral realm has basically been managed by me. I have the experience of managing an astral realm. With your power, I'm sure it won't be long before you need a steward." Qian Han wasn't sure if Gunan already had an astral world, so he cleverly changed his words. "I asked you to help me manage the astral boundary, so that you can betray it again." Gunan looked at him meaningfully and smiled. Qian Han wasn't surprised at all. He already knew that with his past record, the other party would definitely be suspicious. Thus, he bowed deeply. "That person has let go of power for too long to give this old man a chance. With my lord's alertness, will you also give this old man a chance?" He actually advised Gu Nin to be careful of him, and even flattered him. Gu Nin laughed silently, grabbed him, and stepped into the divine kingdom. "I hope you won't regret it." Deep in the galaxy, in an unknown small plane, the two halves of Zuozwa's body were facing each other. "What do you want?" Zuozwa stared angrily ahead. The half of his body was staring at him calmly. After escaping from the astral realm, he had continuously traveled through dozens of small planes to make sure that Red hadn't chased him. Instead, this woman was still following him. She didn't attack, nor did she say a word. She just followed him. But every time Zuozwa wanted to turn around, she would immediately avoid him. Zuozwa's eyes were slightly cold. He knew he had to take back his body as soon as possible. Otherwise, both of them would die because of the loss of their godly souls. But his opponent didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. She was playing guerrilla warfare with him. Zuozwa knew better than anyone that his opponent wanted to compete with him in patience. Maybe his opponent was even more anxious than he was. As long as he could calm down. But how could he calm down? He had planned for so many years, but he lost for some inexplicable reason. Now the astral boundary was almost controlled by someone. He had to split half of his body. No matter how rational a person was, he couldn't control his anger now. "You're starting to panic." An unhurried voice came from the front. The voice was getting closer to the original Gunyan. This was the godly soul starting to affect the body. Zuozwa took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Let's work together and take back solitary destructive heaven. I can give you half of the power of the astral boundary." As long as they could let go of their prejudices, they could form a temporary unit. Taking back the astral boundary would be beneficial to both of them. Gunyan was silent for a while. When Zuozwa started to get impatient, he asked, "How can I trust you?" Zuozwa relaxed slightly. As expected, no one could resist the temptation of a complete astral boundary. "To show my sincerity, I can give you control of my new body." Hearing this, Gunyan's remaining eyes seemed to brighten. He quickly said, "Okay." Zuozwa didn't waste any time. He flew toward the other side, but he was sneering inside. He wasn't lying. He did plan to give control of his body to Gunyan. But once he took back solitary destructive heaven, under Zuozwa's incredulous gaze, Gunyan used one hand as a knife and chopped down on Zuozwa's neck. This chop was obviously premeditated. It directly caused Zuozwa to stagger, and a wound was torn open at the broken part of her neck. "What do you mean?" Zuozwa's voice became colder. Gunyan smiled. "Compared to trusting you, I'm more willing to kill you." In the divine kingdom, Qian Han was casually thrown into the evil god's palace by Gu Nin so that he could undergo the transformation process. Meanwhile, Gu Nin had already run to the construction plane. Gu Nin wasn't worried about Qian Han's loyalty. It wasn't that he had any confidence in Qian Han. It was just that the characteristics of an oracle determined that Gu Nin wasn't afraid of betrayal. The evil divine palace was very strict with the judgment of an oracle. As long as an oracle showed any disloyalty, Gu Nin would immediately receive a warning. If it was more serious, the oracle might even be kicked out of the ranks. Therefore, Gu Nin wasn't worried about those who had been lurking for many years and betrayed him. Instead, those who would rather die than surrender or betray him in the blink of an eye, I gave him a headache. Moreover, Gu Nin had a better way to restrict Qian Han. The transformation of an oracle was relatively easy. Before long, Qianhan stood in front of Gunan again. His expression was even more respectful. "Sir, go in and try," Gunan said to him and pointed to the building in front. Qianhan turned around. It was an exquisite little house. He didn't know the words on the plaque, but he somehow understood the meaning. The Oracle's embassy. Qianhan glanced at Gunan. He didn't dare to ask anything. He walked in with the mentality of entering the tiger's den. After Qianhan walked into the Oracle's embassy, he saw many shadows floating in front of him. The one at the back was himself. Gunan stood outside the Oracle's embassy. A series of data was being displayed on the page. Name: Qianhan Martial Power, 128 Internal Affairs, 105 Tactics, 99 Loyalty, 60. When he saw that his loyalty was only at 60 points, Gunan's lips curled into a faint smile. He then clicked on an option on the page. Rank Restriction. Rank Restriction. Rank 3. Chapter 275. Start of ad on the title. End of ad on the title. 1 Chapter 315 Black Hole Plane /H1 A Style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals 5636565. HTML. Next chapter /add a bibliography border equals 0 table border equals 0 align equals left table border equals 0 align equals left table border equals 0 align equals left trtd /tar /table. There really was a way to slash people in this world. Qianhan, who was in the God Embassy, felt as if his world was going to collapse. /people. Qianhan, who used to manage an astral world, realized that if the Star Masters learned this, all the Break World people would become the Star Master's slaves. The Break World people were so high because they had the means to protect themselves. Even a powerful Star Master, as long as they did not have the power to lock down space or kill them, they could not stop the Break World people from escaping. If the Break World people disappeared from their sight, it would not be easy to find them again. If the Star Master had the power to weaken their states, they could suppress the Break World people to be superclass. They would lose the ability to protect themselves. Just like now, Qianhan walked out of the God Embassy. He looked like a lonely old man. After losing his Break World power, he was able to foresee his fate. He would be kept in the astral world as a treasure trove of knowledge. When the Star Master no longer needed his knowledge, he would be secretly executed like a dog. If it was Qianhan, he would have done it. Gunan did not care about what he was thinking. He called Yin Xiaoxiao over. He asked her to take Qianhan and familiarize him with the God Kingdom. He recruited Qianhan as a God messenger. It was not just for knowledge, as Qianhan thought. He needed Qianhan to manage the God Kingdom for him. Yin Xiaoxiao was familiar with the fairy demon world, but her knowledge was limited to one world. She did not have the mentality of a Break World person. She was not the best housekeeper. Furthermore, Gunan would not allow the God Nation to be under the sole management of a single person. If he was worried that someone would betray him, then he would not give that person the chance to do so. Qianhan's previous words were not without reason. In the empty, evil God's temple, Gunan stood alone in front of the God's embassy. He suddenly felt refreshed. After coming to this world for so long, he had always seen specious things. Only the familiar numbers on the Temple of God made him feel that everything was under his control. In the Oracle's embassy, there was not only Qianhan's data. All the people who had become oracles had detailed information. Name: Yin Xiaoxia Martial Power, 98 Internal Affairs, 99 Command, 102 Stamina, 65 Loyalty, 95. Yin Xiaoxiao's information was no different from what Gunan had expected, other than the fact that Commander, which was not of much use at the moment, was over 100. The rest were all below 100. In the data of the Shrine of God's Consulate, the maximum value of stamina and loyalty was 100 points. As for the other abilities, there was no upper limit. However, 100 was a limit. Once the ability data exceeded 100, the algorithm would be completely different. The required ability would increase exponentially. For example, Yin Xiaoxiao had 98 martial power, but she could at most fight 3 people with 90 martial power. However, an oracle with 105 martial power could easily fight 10 Yin Xiaoxiao. Therefore, Even though Qian Han's 128 martial power was only 30 points higher than Yin Xiaoxiao's, the gap was unimaginably large. Yin Xiaoxiao's loyalty was as high as 95 points, so there was no need to worry about it for the time being. Instead, her stamina was only left with 65 points. This meant that the burden on her during this period was a little too heavy. It was urgent to find someone to share it with. Next was Guan Hachun, Lei Qi, and Lei Ba. They did not exceed Gu Nan's expectations. Their loyalty was also above 80, and there were no signs of betrayal for the time being. The construction of the God Nation was a type of territorial management. The oracle's function was similar to the hero's altar in some games. The oracles were similar to the heroic generals under the Lord. In fact, after the oracle's embassy surpassed level 3, it could indeed directly summon the oracles. The oracle's embassy could also be used to train the oracles, but this function was temporarily useless. Gunan had no money. At the edge of the heavenly world, Gunyin and Zuozua were still chasing one another. They were about to leave the heavenly world. However, the current situation had become that Gunyin was focused on escaping, and Zuozua was constantly chasing after him. They did not have much time left. The wound on Zuozwa's neck continued to deepen, but he did not seem to feel it at all. He continued to chase with a cold expression. In reality, Gunyin's sneak attack did not gain much of an advantage. At most, she could cause some small injuries to Zuozwa. She was still far from her goal of killing him. After Zuozwa escaped from Red and Shadow Song, she fought Gunyin alone. Even without the support of Silent Destroyer Heaven, she still had a huge advantage. This body originally belonged to him, so he had a far greater understanding of it than the other party. He had been a Star Master for over 10,000 years, so he was incomparably familiar with this level of power. He even had a considerable understanding of the other party's mysterious and unfathomable laws. Right now, his only disadvantage was that the other party was focused on escaping. "How long are you going to run?" Zuozwa's cold voice rang out again. Gunyin's figure did not stop. He did not even look back as he continued to jump towards the next plane. Zua could only suppress the surging negative emotions and cautiously chase after him. Gunyin's previous words of killing you still had an impact. Zuozwa felt that this was an unlucky year. Originally, with his foundation, he should have been able to win no matter how he looked at it. His power was already above Red's, so even if someone was causing trouble in Silent Destroyer Heaven, he could easily eliminate them. Only Shadow Song's appearance had truly struck him. Moreover, when he was suppressing Red with all his might, he had no choice but to destroy his own core. However, Zuozwa was not without a backup plan. He had used Gunyin's special laws to revive himself in exchange for a chance to fight to the death. As long as he could regain some of his power in Silent Destroyer Heaven, it would depend on whether No Return's destructive power was stronger or Red's group could last longer. However, he just had to run into the battle between Gunan and Jin Wuyin. This was like the last straw that crushed all of Zuozwa's plans. Now that he had escaped Red's pursuit, he did not even care about the astral world anymore. All he wanted was to get his body back. However, Gunyin looked like he was going to fight to the death and did not communicate with him at all. If this continued, he might become the first Star Master in history to self-destruct. Zua suppressed all her emotions and stepped into the spatial rift, ready to deal with any possible ambushes. Even though Gunyinji had never done something like this before, no one knew if she was doing it on purpose to numb herself. What surprised her was that this time, Gunyin did not continue to run. "We're here," Gunyin said with a chuckle. However, when placed on her half-body, it was somewhat strange. Zuozwa frowned slightly and looked around, but did not find anything special. This was just an ordinary small world. Perhaps there were some special laws here, but wasn't it too much to think that he could rely on this to defeat her? With the difference in experience and knowledge between them, Zuozwa did not think that any geographical advantage could offset this. "I've reincarnated hundreds of times in the past and came here by accident," Gunyin said unhurriedly. "At that time, I didn't understand what this place was. It was only after I left the astral world that I found some clues." Before she could finish, Zuozwa's expression changed slightly. she saw Gunyin casually shoot out a beam of light towards the ground. Following this beam of light, this world was like an enraged lion. Countless laws surged towards Gunyin's body. Zwa, who was beside her, naturally did not escape this calamity. The countless laws were like a giant eggshell, wrapping around the two of them and quickly dragging them to the ground. There's actually an undiscovered black hole plane. You lunatic. Chapter 276. Add on the headline. Add on the headline a one text volume chapter 316 Danger's Edge / H1 A style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals iml. Next chapter / add a bleelager border equals 0 trit table border equals 0 align equals left trit table border equals 0 align equals left trit table border equals 0 align equals left. TRTD / TR / table purple Civ Heaven. Gunin leisurely sat in his courtyard, sunbathing as he flipped through a newspaper. That's right, it was a newspaper. This newspaper was called the All Skies Daily, and it published the daily events of the All Skies world. As for its authority and credibility, one could tell just by looking at the newspaper's name. To be able to keep such a flashy name and not be swallowed up by others, one didn't need to think to know that it had an extraordinary background. The front page of today's All Skies Daily was devoted to the battle between Silent Destruction Heaven and the Astral Plane. This kind of battle between the astral plane and the astral plane might not even happen once every 10,000 years. After several years, it had finally come to an end, so of course there would be a detailed description of it. The newspaper started from the relationship between Zwa and Red, all the way to the final battle between the two. Many details were dug out, including Shadow Song, Gunyin, and even Gunan. I thought it was just a battle that not many people knew about. I didn't expect the whole world to be paying attention to it. Gunan smiled, feeling a bit strange. The longer he stayed in Purple Civ Heaven, the more he felt that the world was very small. Purple Civ Heaven was one of the top major planes, and it was also a super plane that was open to the public. A lot of information was gathered here, so people could see the world without leaving their homes. For example, the battle between Red and Zwa might be no different from the end of the world in the eyes of those involved, but in the All Skies world, it was nothing more than a casual conversation. And the experts who had the ability to interfere wouldn't join in before the battle was decided, adding to the risk. They could wait until the dust settled before dividing up the loser's territory. In any case, at that time, the victor would definitely be greatly injured. How much strength would he have left to fight with them for food? That was why the Astral War was really not worth it. If they did not have absolute confidence, the Astral Lords would not easily start it. Gunan finished reading the contents of the newspaper. Not only did he understand the origins of Zwa and Red, he even understood the twists and turns of the final battle. Zwa's trump card is actually Gunyin. Gunan couldn't help but laugh. He really wanted to tell Zwa that this woman who had been his sister for a period of time was a real poisonous snake. Whoever dared to use her would have to be prepared to be bitten back at any time. As for Zwa's current situation, the newspaper didn't mention it. It only said that they were still investigating. And in the newspaper, they talked about Gunyin's special laws, the relationship between Shadow Song and Zwa, and of course the Nine Serenities Heavenly Demon. This was probably the first time that Gunan had entered the eyes of all the major planes of existence as a Nine Serenities Heavenly Demon. The news of the Heavenly Demon attracted a lot of attention. No one believed that this Heavenly Demon just happened to pass by, and they were more willing to see him as Red's trump card. So it's the Nine Serenities Heavenly Demon. In the Seven-Star Alliance, Jiang Tingwei put down the newspaper in her hand and realized something. No wonder his physical strength was so strong. The All Heavens Daily also dug up the Heavenly Demon, Gunan, in great detail. Many details were written about him since he became famous in the astral realm. For the front page, where every inch of land was worth gold, such treatment was comparable to that of a powerful astral lord. Her brother Jiang Zheng and Situ Jing were sitting next to her. Situ Jing exclaimed, So, that Gu Nan is a heavenly demon. Should we report him? Are you crazy? Jiang Tingwei was shocked by her and blurted out. Jiang Zheng said, heavenly demons aren't necessarily evil. Besides, his strength is at least at the Astral Lord level. No organization would make an enemy of him for no reason. Both heavenly gods and heavenly demons were more like a special race in the all heavens. They were born powerful and had their own bloodlines. The big forces would only try their best to recruit them. Why would they provoke them for no reason? That's true. I heard that there's a 9 Serenities heavenly demon hiding in the Milky Way heaven, but I haven't seen anyone enforce justice on behalf of the heavens, Situ Jing mumbled. The Milky Way heaven was one of the 13 heavens. It was a true superdimension and the pinnacle of all the star dimension. It was said that there was a heavenly demon under the command of its astral lord. Let's pretend this didn't happen. This isn't something we can get involved in, Jiang Tingwei concluded. Let's continue to find some missions to do and avoid the destructive heaven for now. Gunan got up from his residence and didn't stay any longer. He stepped out of the purple sieve heaven and went straight to the edge of the all heavens. The all heavens were very big. The dimensions were like bubbles that were squeezed into a small bottle. Some of the dimensions could be crossed, but some needed to be transferred. The dimension Gu Nan wanted to go to was a place that required a few transfers. It was called Dilual World. When he arrived, Qian Han had been waiting for him for a while. My lord, Qian Han revealed a fawning smile when he saw Gu Nan appear, and he hurriedly moved over and greeted. Qian Han's level had been restored to level 4. Because Gu Nan was going to the Golden Giant tribe, he had to lead the way. The God Emissary's level of power was limited to the God Kingdom. But ever since Qian Han found out about Gu Nan's tricks, his loyalty had skyrocketed. Now, it was at 75 points. On the other hand, under Gu Nan's watchful eyes, he couldn't play many tricks. Dilual World was a very small dimension. It was even smaller than the Gosi world that Gu Nan had been to, but the number of elites there was shocking. Gu Nan had only been standing here casually, but he had already run into a few world breakers. As if sensing Gu Nan's confusion, Qian Han said, Mr. Dilual World is a frontline dimension. Once you leave this place, you'll reach the neutral zone. A little further, and you'll reach the world of gods. You know about the world of gods? Gu Nan asked, raising his eyebrows. Qian Han nodded solemnly. The world of gods is like us. It's a naturally formed dimension cluster. With the protection of the dimension walls, it's difficult for outsiders to enter, but their elites often come out. After Qian Han's explanation, Gu Nan finally understood the situation. Like the all heavens and the world of gods, there were naturally many dimensions that were huddled together. People called them dimension clusters. With the existence of the dimension walls, it was difficult for outsiders to enter or leave. To the elites within the dimension clusters, the dimension walls were not guarded at all. They could come and go as they pleased. It was a blessed protection. This gave Gu Nan a headache. If he couldn't enter the world of gods, it wouldn't be a good thing for his plan to kill gods. But Qian Han looked around again. The density of experts here is indeed higher than usual. Maybe some rare treasure has appeared. Just as he finished speaking, a strange power seeped into the sky. It turned into raindrops and began to fall. Each drop carried a thick aura of precepts. In front of Gu Nan and Qian Han, a world breaker couldn't dodge in time. A drop of precepts fell on his head. His entire body aged rapidly. In an instant, his hair turned white. Finally, his organs failed and he died. This is the aging precepts, Qian Han said in shock. It's time. Gu Nan grabbed Qian Han and used him as a shield. This is the power of Vanlin. What the hell is this place? Chapter 277. The title starts with ad. End of ad on Titla 1, Chapter 317 passing /H1 A style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals 5639167. HTML. Next chapter /add border equals 0 chart table border equals 0 align equals left chart table border equals 0 align equals left chart table border equals 0 align equals left trtd /tar slashed table Gu, then grabbed Qian Han and used him as a shield before fleeing in one direction. In the instant that the rain of time fell, Gunan was probably the one who reacted the fastest in all of Talushi. He blocked the attack the fastest and ran the fastest. There was nothing he could do about it. Gunan was too familiar with this move. Almost at the same time that the aura appeared, he had already sensed it. Even in the game in Shifang's previous life, the god of time was a famous super god, a tier 11 lord god. For Gunan, level 11 meant that he had already reached the second job advancement level. This was not a first job advancement with a different playstyle, but a genuine second job advancement that had undergone a qualitative change. Not to mention the fact that Gunan was still one step away from the first transition. While Gunan was fleeing, Diluar realm had been baptized by the rain of time and was in a complete mess. Anything that came into contact with the raindrops would have its time stolen at a terrifying speed. The buildings were weathering, the creatures were aging, and even the laws themselves were undergoing minute changes. It's much weaker than in the game. Is it because of the bit wall? Gunan thought to himself as he ran quickly, trying to get out of the influence of the rain of time. Gunan's understanding of the gods was probably above that of anyone in this world. For a Lord God-level existence like Van Leeuwen, Gunan was familiar with almost all of their techniques. Rain of Time was one of Van Leeuwen's signature skills. It had a large area of effect and was extremely difficult to defend against. It was definitely one of the top 10 most disgusting skills. However, the Rain of Time that Gunan saw now was much weaker than in the game, be it in terms of range or impact. Qian Han was placed on top of Gunan's head. Even though Gunan's movements were quite good and he had done his best to use the various structures to avoid the Rain of Time, many raindrops still fell on Qian Han's body. After the Rain of Time robbed a large amount of time, the frown on Qian Han's aged face increased at a visible speed. The lifespan of a break world person depended on their understanding of the rules and how complete their rules were. Qian Han was a top break world elite who had lived for 1,000 years. He was one of the people closest to becoming a Star Lord. His life was very long, but under the effect of the time rain, he was like a lamp that had run out of oil. Gunan couldn't care less. If he didn't have a good shield like Qian Han, he would have been drenched in the rain. You said to lead the way to the Golden Giant's territory? Who would care about this at a time like this? If Qian Han died, then so be it. As for his knowledge, let's see if there's a chance to revive him in the future. Gunan made a decision in a split second, and his footsteps quickened. He did not know how long he had been running, but Gunan suddenly felt the ground in front of him light up. He had left the range of the Rain of Time. Gunan put down Qian Han that he was holding. The old man was no longer breathing. He was already a dead body, so Gunan tossed him aside. He looked behind him. The area that was affected by the Rain of Time was undergoing a shocking change. All the buildings had been eroded by the wind. Some flowers and trees were still growing generation after generation. They went from seeds to saplings to big trees. Then, they suddenly withered and died. The power of the Rain of Time was weakening, but it could still make a 1,000-year-old tree's life come to an end in the blink of an eye. Van Leeuwen, why did he do this? Gunan was confused. Even in the game of his past life, there were very few stories that involved main gods. The 12 main gods were already a pyramid in the background of the game. They would not be touched easily. The power of the bit wall was indeed strong. The Rain of Time, which should have lasted for half an hour, stopped in just a moment. The area in front of Gunan was quiet again. Around Gunan, there were a few lucky survivors who were at the edge of the Rain of Time. Each of them had a lingering fear in their hearts. After being affected by the Rain of Time, they could only rely on their own bodies to escape. Any law was covered by time. Even if they managed to open a spatial rift, it would be instantly washed away. Just then, two people stood up from the ruins. It was a man and a woman. They were holding a silver paper umbrella. It was this umbrella that protected them. Senior sister, we're saved. We're saved. The man excitedly pulled his senior sister and shouted. It seemed that he did not have many such experiences of surviving a disaster. What are you shouting for? Hurry up and put away the umbrella, his senior sister said quickly. At the same time, she looked around vigilantly. Sure enough, she saw many eyes focused on them. To be able to survive such a terrifying spell, what kind of treasure was this umbrella? Many of those gazes were filled with obvious greed. This is the umbrella that Senior Lou gave me. Who could take it away? The man was indifferent. Then, he looked ahead and said in surprise, Mr. Gunan? Gunan had naturally noticed these two living people in the ruins a long time ago, and he recognized who the man was. It was Lou Weining, another outsider he met when he went to the Seven Stars Alliance to form a team. So, Gunan nodded gently and did not speak. Lou Weining was very enthusiastic. He pulled his senior sister and ran to Gunan. Mr. Gunan, are you also looking for the secret treasure of time? When he said the words secret treasure of time, the number of eyes focused on them increased significantly. It seemed that this was the reason why the frontline plane, Tilluo Shur, had an unusual density of powerhouses. Gunan? Lou Weining's senior sister was slightly stunned when she heard this name. Then, she said, he's the one you went silent. Oh. The senior sister only said one word before she hurriedly covered her mouth. The news that the terminating Heavenly Star Lord was suspected to have died had already spread like wildfire. Naturally, the appearance of the Nine Serenity's heavenly demon couldn't be kept a secret. Lou Weining's master could naturally guess that it was Gunan. So, the senior sister pulled hard on Lou Weining's sleeve, but the latter did not move. Instead, he said solemnly, Senior sister, I don't care what you think. Mr. Gunan is my friend. How about it, Mr. Gunan? Do you want to come with us? Lou Weining invited Gunan. Senior Lou's umbrella can guide us. Before Gunan spoke, he suddenly had a strong feeling in his heart. It was as if there was a voice that kept calling him to join Lou Weining's ranks. It was like the legendary protagonist was about to embark on a journey and was ready to accept companions. Could this be the template of the protagonist? Gunan filled in the blanks in his mind, but he quickly shifted his gaze to the silver umbrella. This silver umbrella had some inexplicable aura, like some kind of extremely obscure time law. Originally, Gunan thought it was the remnant of the Reign of Time, but now that he looked at it carefully, he found that it had another origin. Another controller of time? Mr. Gunan? Lou Weining saw that he did not speak for a long time and could not help but say, Legend has it that the secret treasure of time allows people to bypass the time law, giving them a lot more time to cultivate. If I can cultivate for 3 to 5 years, then... Chapter 278. Ad on the headline began. Ad on the headline in Dead 1 text chapter 318 Calamity falls from the Havinsa style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals iml. Next chapter / add a bleelager border equals 0 trig table border equals 0 align equals left trig table border equals 0 align equals left trig table border equals 0 align equals left. TRTD /TR / table when they saw wild bosses and treasures, they would immediately rush to them. This was the practice of novice players. Players like Gu Nan would always weigh the risks and benefits, as well as whether or not the final rewards would be useful. Lou Weining's description of the secret treasure of time didn't interest Gunan at all, and Fan Luan's unexpected appearance made him even more vigilant. Main god-level existences could already see through him, as long as he revealed enough of his methods. In the Violet Civ Heaven, Gunan, who had previously been at the front lines, decisively hid in the rear after abandoning Qianhan, the new divine emissary, and waited for news from others. As expected, all the front pages of today's newspapers were reporting on what had happened on the front lines. Fan Luan obviously hadn't acted out of boredom. Rather, there was a reason that even Gu Nin hadn't expected. He had fought with someone, and his opponent was one of the 13 heavens, Lu One of the Time Sky. Lu One of the Time Sky, no wonder that umbrella had the aura of another type of law of time. Gu Nan continued to flip through the newspapers, at the same time expressing sympathy for his own luck. Even on the front lines, it was rare for the 13 heavens to fight with a main god, but he had just happened to run into one. Telooshi was just one of the many frontline planes, and had most likely been affected by the aftershocks of the battle between the two. As for what happened afterwards, none of the newspapers could explain it clearly. In fact, they didn't even know who had won or lost. After all, The level of this matter was too high. On the other hand, the battle between the two worlds, which had attracted the attention of all the heavens, had already had a follow-up in the past 2 days. But because of that person from the time sky, they could only occupy a corner. The astral realm was beginning to stabilize, and 4 Star Lords of silent destructive heaven had already shown their faces, all of them major characters at or above the realm level. In the end, it would be up to them to decide who would take down solitary destroyer heaven or split it among themselves. As for the current situation of the 2-star masters, there is no need to say much about Red, but Zwa's whereabouts had attracted many people's suspicions, and there was still no definite conclusion. Logically speaking, if Zwa had truly perished, then the still destructive skies should have directly collapsed. Its source would have scattered, causing many Star Lords to fight over it. If he was still alive, then silent destruction skies would be intact, and no one would be able to take it away from him. But now, still destroyed sky was neither of those. The original source had already appeared, but it did not spread. Many young Star Masters and World Breakers who were waiting for a chance were disappointed. The Star Lord and the Star Boundary were one. Now, that silent destructive sky was in such a strange state, no one could understand what was going on. Only when someone dug up some ancient information did they come to a conclusion that Zwa was probably sealed in some black hole plane. The black hole plane was a special existence that was only mentioned in ancient information. The rules of these planes were very special. Once there was a World Breaker class power, it would be sealed by the plane itself. The power would be completely isolated from the outside world. Regardless of where it came from, it would absorb everything. It was like the black hole in the space plane, so it was named that way. Seal. When Gunan saw this conclusion, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. But it was not like there were no people who disagreed with this view. For example, someone said that the features of the black hole plane were very obvious. A Star-Lord class character would be able to find out when he entered. How could he have displayed too much power? The debates did not attract too much attention. After all, the main point was who had the solitary destroyer general. As for the fallen Star-Lord, he was no longer within the scope of people's concern. Gunan put down the newspaper and immediately put all of this behind him. He was not interested in Zwa and Red's grudge. After reaching level 5, when he was in Sky Demon mode, even a Star-Lord like Red might not be able to stop him. He now had the power to protect himself. The most important thing right now was to finish the 6 basic buildings. He needed to level up the Evil Gods Hall to level 1 and complete the first class. After leveling up to level 6, Gunan was no longer limited by the limits of the first class. Not only did his evil god body become stronger, but his Sky Demon mode was also stronger. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, another 2 months had passed. During those 2 months, Gunan spent most of his time in Purple Sky. He collected first-hand information about the front lines. After all, it was a main god-class attack. It was impossible for Gunan not to be curious. Perhaps the newspaper did not have too many secrets. In the public information, there was still no information about the 2 big shots. A few days ago, there was another wave of time rain. This time, there are not many casualties, but the meaning behind it was very thought-provoking. In a short span of 2 months, the great figures of the 13 heavens had actually acted twice. Close to 2 years had passed in the God Nation. The 4th and 5th buildings, the Deity Administration Platform, and God's Servant Office had been built. The 6th building was almost enough points. The Deity Administration Platform, as the name suggested, was a building used to manage the deities. The God's Servant Office was a place to create basic soldiers. God's servants were the most primitive soldiers of the God Nation. During this time, Gunan did not encounter any random events. But overall, he was satisfied with the speed. I guess I should have enough points by today. Gunan estimated in his heart. At this moment, a maid ran over hurriedly. Sir Luo came personally. He said he has something important to discuss with you. Luo? Important? Gunan touched his chin. He was doubtful about his neighbor's so-called important matter. Anyway, that's it. In Gunan's house, Luo slammed a notice on the table. Didn't you ask me about the front lines? As soon as I received the news, I immediately sent it to you. How about it? I'm loyal, right? This is really a big deal, Gunan said with slight surprise. Luo nodded with satisfaction at his attitude. The message on the notice he brought was actually very simple. It was a Time-Star Lord Lu Wen's declaration to the entire heavenly realms. He called on all the strong people in the world who were above the break world level to go to the front lines. The reason was, of course, not for the sake of the country, but for the treasure. The secret treasure of time that had been discussed for 2 months had finally appeared. It was a paradise called Time Arena. Time Arena, Gunan said this familiar name. He suddenly had a feeling of returning to his previous life. Luo saw him like this and thought he was tempted. He smiled and said, "If you are interested, then go and try it. I really envy you young people." Bang! Suddenly, the door to Gunan's house was pushed open, shocking the female servant standing outside. For cultivators with serious expressions on their faces quickly walked in. Shockingly, they were wearing the uniform of the core members of the Astral Plane Gate. Chapter 279. Ad. On the title begins. Add on the title, Inch 1 Text Volume Chapter 319 St. Cloister / H1 A Style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals Emil. Next chapter / add a Bleelager border equals 0. Table border equals 0. Align equals left. Table border equals 0. Align equals left. Table border equals 0. Align equals left. TRTD / TR / table. The Astral Gate was a super organization that spanned across many planes. Compared to it, the Ming Lu that Gunan had stayed in before was just a small fry. There were many different opinions about the background of the Astral Gate. There was no unified view, but at least one thing was certain: it was very powerful. As a public organization, the Astral Gate had peripheral members like Gunan. At the same time, it also had core members. They were cultivators that truly belonged to the Astral Gate. While enjoying the benefits of the organization, they also had to accept the organization's orders. Now, standing in front of Gunan were 4 core members of the Astral Gate. They wore special uniforms, and on their chests was a strange astral array that shone faintly. As soon as the leader's voice fell, the other 3 walked forward in unison, while the leader himself stayed behind to hold the line, probably afraid that Gunan would break out of the encirclement and escape. Wait! Before Gunan could speak, Luo had already said, "When did the Astral Gate become so unreasonable? Why do you want to capture him?" What Luo said was actually right. Large organizations could be overbearing, but they could not show it on their faces. Sometimes a fig leaf was quite important. But this time, the 4 of them did not seem to care about this at all. The bearded man who spoke earlier said in a deep voice, "Don't bother with things that you shouldn't." Luo was so angry that he did not know what to say for a moment. If it was not for the fact that the Astral Gate's uniform had its own peculiarities, and that the astral glow could not be replicated, he would have thought that someone was impersonating them. He turned his head and said in a low voice, "Gunan, they are indeed from the Astral Gate. Do not resist. When you go out, remember to make a big deal out of this. That way, even if someone wants to play dirty, it will be Gunan." Before Rowan could finish muttering, Gunan's figure had already dashed out and instantly appeared in front of a person. Gunan's hand pressed down on that person's head. Kacha! The crisp sound of a bone breaking could be heard, making one's hair stand on end. That person's head had been pressed into his body by Gunan. The entire scene seemed to freeze for a moment. Then they saw Gunan stretch out a hand, and the neck of the person on the left was broken. In the next instant, Gunan grabbed the remaining man's hair with his right hand and pressed his head down. At the same time, he struck the man's face with his knee. A terrifying force came, and the man's head exploded. The body slowly fell down, leaving only a scalp and hair in Gunan's hand. Blood and brain matter flowed everywhere, and the scene suddenly became silent. Only the sound of blood dripping could be heard. In just a moment, 3 world breakers who were not weak had been killed by Gunan in an instant. Moreover, it was with pure physical strength. There was no fluctuation of law. In the face of absolute speed, any extraordinary law or the ability to open up the void was useless. Luo won, and the bearded man didn't know what to say. They had a deeper feeling about Gunan's move. There was no fluctuation of law, which meant that it would not attract the attention of the cultivators in the city. It meant that Gunan could kill people at will in the city and then leave. Gunan took a step forward, and his figure appeared in front of the bearded man. He grabbed his neck and said, "Why do you want to catch me?" It was almost the same question as Rowan, but the result was completely different. It was Duan Wenqi from the organization who gave the order to take you there. The man was about to cry. As for the rest, we really do not know. At this time, the man recognized who Gunan was. With just his body, he could kill world breakers like he was killing a chicken. Wasn't that the 9 hidden sky demon from a while ago? Duan Wenqi's order was too urgent, and they did not have time to investigate the details of the target. They knew the target's name was Gunan, and they also knew there was a sky demon with the same name. But they were two people who had nothing to do with each other. Who would link them up? The man's back was soaked in a cold sweat. He did not dare tear up the space to escape. He could imagine that he might not be able to enter the space crack before he was torn apart. Counselor? Gunan touched his chin. The Astral Gate was a council system, and there were only 17 counselors. Counselor Duan Wenqi was definitely at the top. So why did you want to catch him? Instinct told Gu and that this was most likely related to the front line. Lu Weining was probably the only one who could link it to him. Gunan let go of the man, patted his shoulder, and said, "Go back and tell that counselor that I will go and find him in 2 days." God's Kingdom. After Gunan sent away the people at the Astral Gate, he immediately returned to God's Kingdom. As expected, not long after, he had accumulated a new 10,000 points. Once Gunan built the 6th zero-level building, he would complete his first-class advancement and step into level 6. Among the 5 levels before his first-class advancement, level 5 was the level that Gunan had spent the least time in. This was because he had already prepared a God's Kingdom for himself before he reached level 5. This was usually the part that wasted the most players' time. On the contrary, after getting the God's Kingdom, everyone spent about the same amount of time building it. Gunan opened the building list, and after a simple allocation of resources, he immediately chose a building, the Holy Corridor. The Holy Corridor was not in Gunan's original plan. He had originally wanted to build a training camp. However, because of the incident at the Time Arena, Gunan changed his plans at the last minute. Under normal circumstances, the Holy Corridor would not be built in the early stages of a God's Kingdom. Only God's Kingdoms above level 3 would be considered. Of course, this did not mean that the building was useless. On the contrary, it was very important, and no player would give up on it. The Holy Corridor could provide players with a saint's body, inherit a portion of the player's abilities, and be personally controlled by the player. Simply put, it was an official smurf. However, for players who had just completed their first-class advancement, the existence of such a smurf was extremely important. On one hand, smurf accounts were convenient, and they would not be instantly discovered no matter which realm they descended upon. On the other hand, it was easy to hide the identity of an evil god. A saint's body had nothing to do with an evil god. If he were to head to the front line, he would very likely have to face the god of time, Famlin. Gunan had no choice but to be careful. In his previous life, let alone a level 11 Lord God, he had even slaughtered a level 15 god of light and justice many times over. However, he was only about to reach level 6 now. There was nothing strange about the Holy Corridor's construction. It was just a circular corridor within the evil god's temple, with a silver humanoid sculpture in the center. Gunan was in no hurry to summon his smurf. What he had to do next was the main event. Chapter 280. Add on the title began. Add on the title in Dead 1 text volume chapter 320 the man with a dragon on his shoulder style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals Immel. Next chapter / add a ledger border equals 0. Table border equals 0. Align equals left table border equals 0. Align equals left table border equals 0. Align equals left trtd /tr / table outside the evil god's temple. Yin Xiao and Lan Si were walking side by side, discussing something as they walked. It seemed to be some management issues in the Divine Kingdom. Ever since he discovered that Yin Xiao didn't have enough energy, Gunan had told Lan Si to take over as soon as possible. Yin Xiao, on the other hand, had a lot of energy and was always above 95. The two of them took care of some matters outside and habitually walked toward the evil god's temple. The two administrative desks were both here, and they were the things that they interacted with the most in the Divine Kingdom. However, just as they were about to reach it, the ground trembled slightly, and the evil god's temple in front of them expanded out of thin air, pushing away everything around it. Lan Si looked at this scene in shock. She had seen a lot of things over the years. It wasn't that creating something out of thin air was difficult to accept, but this scene was getting closer and closer to what she had seen and heard in her early years. Wasn't this what miracles were like in the flowering Divine Kingdom? Teacher has made another breakthrough. Yin Xiao was quite happy. She had gradually accepted her identity as the manager of the Divine Kingdom. Controlling the power of a realm was also in line with her pursuit. The changes in the evil god's temple continued, but it was much calmer than before. It wasn't until the trembling from the ground completely stopped that the two of them walked forward. They slowly walked into the temple, and then saw Gu Nan standing calmly in front of them. "Teacher," Yin Xiao cautiously called out, as if she was afraid of disturbing Gu Nan's breakthrough. Gu Nan turned around and looked as if he had just come back to his senses. He casually said, "Oh, you're here." The two girls looked at each other in bewilderment. Gu Nan didn't look like a Star-Lord at all. Of course, they didn't know that Gu Nan was busy opening the Sage Corridor. As for himself, even though he had indeed reached the 6th level and could be called a god from now on, it wasn't like Gu Nan hadn't seen the world before. So what was there to be excited about? A silver light shone not far away. Only then did the two women realize that there was an elegant corridor in the new evil god's temple, and the silver light was coming from the statue in the center. The silver light gradually converged, gradually forming a figure below. That person was wearing a long silver robe. His expression was elegant and calm, but his face was shockingly Gu Nan's face. In the next moment, his expression changed abruptly. It became cold and arrogant, as if he would only say, "Oh, awesome," to everything. Gu Nan had already taken over the saint's body. Not long after Gu Nan left the purple sieve sky, he returned. This time, he was no longer in his original body. He had a saint's body. He guessed the people from the astral world door had come to him because of the front line, and he was interested in the time arena. If he wanted to participate, this saint's body was enough. Saint's power was at the peak of the 4th level, which meant they were the strongest in the world. But he had inherited Gu Nan's rules and super strong body, so his real power was much stronger. But with that kind of power, there was no room for growth. No matter how much the Sage Corridor leveled up, the saint's power would stop there. At most, he would inherit more of Gu Nan's skills. This involved a basic rule of the game. Gods could not be created. Level 4 was just one step out of the world. They could be called saint. Level 5 and above was considered a god. All they lacked was a godfire. It was the same for the worlds. Level 5 and above was called a Star-Lord. Even if their power was different, some were weaker than the top break world, and some could fight a leader. The Star-Lord represented another level. Even Zuozua, who was known as one of the strongest in the 13 worlds, only had top break world elites. She did not have a Star-Lord. It was like in the god world. Aside from the leader, there was no god who would rely on someone else's god kingdom. In other words, those who would be interested in the Sure Jitian conscription order would at most be ordinary Star-Lords without any astral realms, right? Gu Nan calculated in his heart. Gu Nan appeared in his house in purple sieve sky. The blood there had been cleaned up. There was even a girl waiting for him. "Mr. Gu Nan, please come with me." The girl's face was pretty, but her face did not show any emotion. Even her voice was very calm and cold. Her tone was not as strong as the other 4, but she had a presence that could not be doubted. That was the result of being in a high position for a long time. "Lead the way." Gu Nan did not do anything this time. He really did want to see the person behind this. The girl was very straightforward in leading the way. She waved her finger. A silver-white path appeared in front of them. It led to somewhere far away. This power was not the ability of a break-world elite to rip open space. It was a finer control of space. Gunan followed the young girl and walked in slowly. After walking through the path, he came to a damp courtyard where two people were already waiting for him. One was an old man who looked calm. His movements were very respectful. The other was a handsome man in a black suit. He looked to be in his 30s. The old man was wearing an Astral World Gate uniform, but his clothes were purple. It was the uniform of a representative. Gunan instantly recognized who he was. It was the representative who had ordered his arrest, Duan Wenqi. Gunan looked at the two of them. He waited for them to speak first, but they were not the ones who moved first. It was the girl who was leading the way. She took another step forward, and her body suddenly swelled up, turning into a 100-meter-long silver dragon. She circled in the sky once before descending. It landed on the shoulder of the man in the suit. The 100-meter-long dragon was standing on the man's shoulder with both feet. The scene looked very strange, but the two of them were strangely harmonious. "I am Lu Wan," the man said. He had a peaceful smile on his face. He looked like a normal person. But for him to be standing there, the name Lu Wan could only mean one thing: Celestial Star Master, a super elite who could fight with a master god. But no matter how high his status was, no matter how strong he was, Gunan could still remain calm. That was because he was a smurf. "What's the matter?" His rude attitude made Duan Wenqi's face change. Lu Wan was still calm. "I hope you can help me with something." "What is it?" "Help a little friend defeat other opponents in the time arena and get the Sand of Time." Gunan laughed silently. "He invited me before, but I rejected him," Duan Wenqi said. "If you still reject him now, I am afraid you will not want to see the result." "Haha." Gunan used two unique words to express his attitude. Lu Wan waved his hand. "I have never liked to force people to do things. I can give you the Sand of Time as a reward. It will be very helpful for the start of the Star Realm." Duan Wenqi's expression did not change. He was also an extremely powerful Star Master, and his cultivation was not lower than Red's. He could naturally see the background of this clone of Gunan. "What if I still reject?" Gunan said after some thought. "Then I can only express my regret and find someone else to help." Lu Wan sighed. Although it might be someone that the little friend doesn't know, the Sand of Time must be obtained by him. Chapter 281. Beginning of add-on title. Ending of add-on title 1 Chapter 321 Request for assistance /H1A style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals 5642543. HTML. Next chapter /add a Bollinger border equals 0 table border equals 0 align equals left table border equals 0 align equals left table border equals 0 align equals left trtd/tar/table. As Gunan's words rang out, the entire scene fell into a strange silence. Astonishment appeared in Lu Wan's eyes, while the gaze that Duan Wenqi used to look at Gunan was as if she was looking at an idiot. Even the huge silver dragon on Lu Wan's shoulder could not help but lower its head, its massive eyes staring straight at Gunan. With her lacking understanding of human society, she couldn't really understand the meaning behind his words. It sounded like he wanted to do something bad, but why did he say it out loud? Shouldn't he not say a single word and secretly take action when the time came? Lu Wan laughed involuntarily. For an old monster like him who had lived for God, knows how many years, he was naturally able to understand the true meaning behind Gunan's words. Putting it nicely, the meaning of this young man before him was probing. Putting it bluntly, it was nothing more than him having nothing to fear, relying on the fact that it was only a doppelganger that had come, and that no one knew where his star world and main body were. He dared to be so unbridled. Since that's the case, this Lu will wish you a smooth journey. Lu Wan still had that unfathomable look on his face, as if nothing could stir up any ripples in his heart. Gunan nodded his head, then turned and left without saying another word. This Gunan should be the heavenly demon that was rumored a few days ago. But from his appearance, he doesn't seem like it. After Gunan left, Duan Wenqi actually revealed a slight smile, shaking her head as she gazed in the direction he had left. There wasn't a single trace of the angry look from before. Lu Wan, however, said, Not necessarily. I've seen that heavenly demon of the Milky Way heaven a few times. He's usually no different from an ordinary person. Duan Wenshi pulled out a stack of documents from somewhere. It was all the information on Gunan. Even the fact that he came from the Langya world had been thoroughly investigated. After all, Gunan had gone to the astral realm through the Ascension Center. Even Ming Lu knew about this. If the astral realm gate wanted to investigate, there was no secret at all. The only thing that could not be known was what happened before his ascension. This was because a small plane like the Langya world had been in the past for hundreds of years. There were no clues left at all. Such a small plane couldn't even bear the burden of a secret technique like time reversal. His background is clear, but he advanced by leaps and bounds as soon as he entered a world-level plane. Other than the reincarnation of an almighty being, there's really no other explanation. Duan Wenshi casually tossed the information aside and said in a low voice, "I don't care about his background, but the sand of time must be obtained by Lu Wenying." Lu Wen said solemnly. Duan Wenshi nodded silently. He naturally understood that Lu Wenying was an extremely important part of this plan. He had to help him obtain the treasure, but he couldn't help him too obviously. Originally, Gunan was the best candidate. He had a connection with Lu Wenying, and his strength was sufficient. Unfortunately, I'll go find the next candidate, Duan Wenshi said. Lu Wen nodded lightly. The huge silver dragon spread its wings, as though it could cover the sky, casting a shadow over the two of them. Within the God Nation, Gunan's main body opened its eyes. The saint's body naturally didn't return to the God Nation. He wasn't a fool. If he returned to the God Nation in front of Lu Wen, wouldn't that be asking to be exposed? In reality, even if his smuff died outside, Gunan didn't intend to recall it back. Safety was the first priority. Regarding the time arena, Gunan was speaking the truth. If the sand of time was destined to be obtained by Lu Wenying, then he really didn't intend to enter the arena. He would just wait outside. If it was someone else, they might be worried that the treasure would be directly used once it landed in someone else's hands. However, Gunan didn't have such worries, because he knew all too well what kind of place the time arena was and what the sand of time was used for. In the game, the time arena was a rather famous blueprint instance. As the name suggested, it didn't produce sin points or points. The reward after clearing it was a building blueprint, which was the sand of time that Lu Wen spoke of. The blueprint could be used to build a corresponding building in the God Nation, which was the time arena. Its purpose was to shorten the training time of the troops. It was considered a rather practical building in the God Nation during the war phase. Moreover, the time arena wasn't considered a basic building. It could only be built through external blueprints. Blessed Grottos? Gunan thought of the name of the building here and couldn't help but shake his head with a smile. In a sense, it wasn't wrong to call the God Nation building a Blessed Grottos. In any case, they were all special areas in the star boundary that could provide special enhancement effects. The difference was that the Blessed Grottos were mostly scattered throughout the star boundary, while Gunan's God Nation building was all gathered together in the Evil God's Temple. Gunan moved his sage's body to the frontline plane and chose to lie low for the time being. He would gather first-hand information while waiting for the results of the treasure hunt. As long as the sand of time didn't fall into the hands of the Pantheon world, no matter who had it, it wouldn't stop Gunan from snatching it. After all, he wasn't a Star Lord with an astral world, so he couldn't use the sand of time. Just then, a piece of news reached the Evil God's Temple. It came from someone he hadn't seen for a long time. It was Redtail, who had been sent by Gunan to rebuild the White Mist. She had gone to the extremely remote Crescent World. If she wanted to return to the God Nation, she would need to first summon Gunan in order to borrow his power to return. Moreover, Redtail was just an extraordinaire. If she stayed in the Crescent World for too long, her lifespan wouldn't be enough. Therefore, after the White Mist was basically built, Redtail didn't stay there. Instead, she went to the Bone World with Lan Si to control the layout of the Crescent World through reincarnation. The news she sent was to ask for help. This matter was simple. She set up a small reincarnation organization in the Bone World. She used the people there to control the Crescent World. But after a while, it quickly attracted the attention of the locals. Now, the new White Mist was being targeted. It was another reincarnation organization that was targeting them. They seemed to have a world breaker. That was why Redtail sent people to ask for help. After Gunan read it, he shook his head. Setting up a reincarnation organization was one of the few ways to take advantage of the locals. He didn't expect there would still be people who coveted it. Lancy had to help manage the God Nation. She didn't have the time to be Redtail's bodyguard. The Shadow Servant's intelligence wasn't up to standard. After they left the God Nation, they were like robots that only listened to orders. It looked like finding a group of God messengers who were strong enough and wouldn't easily betray him was an urgent matter. The construction of the God Nation required a lot of manpower. Gunan had expected that. So, in the game, the God Nation would often have a few connate life forms as their subordinates. The Gold Giant was a good choice, but it was a shame they encountered a main god. Gunan almost died there. Qian Han, who was leading the way, died as well. Now, Outer Sky had attracted a lot of attention. If Gunan went there to collect God messengers, it would be like walking right into a trap. Let's deal with the Bone World first, and see if there are any break world breakers that I can use. After the time arena is over, I will think about the Outer Sky Xenogeneics. Gunan made up his mind. His holy body, which was in the front lines, moved. After a few leaps, he arrived in the Bone World. There was an organization called Flying Cloud Hill. Chapter 282. Starting from the title. Ending from the Titla 1 text chapter 322 Bone World /H1 A style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals Iml. Next chapter /add border equals 0. Table border equals 0. Align equals left TRT table border equals 0. Align equals left TRT table border equals 0. Align equals left TRTD /TR/table Bone World. Bone World was a new astral world. It was upgraded from a small plane to a realm plane by the Astral Lord White Bone Lord, making it one of the main worlds. Therefore, although White Bone Lord was young among the Astral Lords, he was very powerful and strict with the management of the astral world. The Bone World was similar to Gunan's Holy Kingdom. The entire world was divided into 196 cities, which radiated outward from the center of the cities, forming rings after rings. Redtail was currently at the 21st ring of Left Side City of the Bone World. The 21st ring was close to the border of Left Side City and was considered a suburb. Redtail chose this place as the headquarters of the White Mist because it was far away. But at this moment, Redtail started to hate his own judgment again. Commander, let's move first. We can collect more resources if we run out, but we're done for if we lose our people. A young man stood in front of Redtail and tried to persuade him. The young man's name was Bai Shueshing. Not only did his name sound a little feminine, but his appearance was also rather androgynous. Because of his appearance, he was laughed at by his family since he was young. That was why he decided to reincarnate and join the White Mist in a fit of rage. In the Bone World, those who had the surname Bai were all from powerful families. Bai Shueshing was one of the higher-ups in the White Mist. However, Redtail only kept a straight face and didn't reply. He waited until Bai Shueshing's saliva ran dry before he said, "Did Old Mo and the others ask you to be the lobbyist?" Old Mo and the others that Redtail mentioned were also higher-ups in the organization. Bai Shueshing was not surprised because he had a clear conscience. Yes, but this is also my intention. I have my own plans. You guys go hide in Zwolfong City first. Redtail shook his head. Great Commander. Bai Shueshing was anxious. She wanted to say something else, but Redtail firmly waved her hand and chased her out. He walked out the door dejectedly. There were already a few people waiting for the result outside. The middle-aged man with a face full of stubble was the one Redtail mentioned. Old Mo, what do you think? Someone at the side asked, but when he saw Bai Shueshing's expression, he immediately understood that it most likely did not go well. Old Mo also sighed and didn't know what to say. The commander was so smart, but why didn't he know what to do at this moment? In the past few months, they had plundered a lot of resources and even had a fortuitous encounter in a certain plane. If they gave up now, they might not have such an opportunity in the future. But this was still better than being wiped out, right? The ultimatum of the Flying Cloud territory had been issued, and someone would definitely come by tonight at the latest. Besides, they were in such a remote place, and no one would care if they died here. They were silent for a while, and finally old Emo said, "Inform the brothers below to disperse and go back to the city. We will go to persuade the commander for the last time. If she is still unwilling to go, then take her away even if you have to tie her up." Bai Xuesheng said resolutely. He was a son of an aristocratic family who knew nothing but cultivation, and even had some inferiority complex. It was all thanks to the commander that he had transformed into such a situation in just a few months. At this time, he would not leave her alone. That's right. Old Emo also nodded solemnly. After ordering someone to go down to inform the others, he took the lead to open the door. "Commander, who are you?" After he walked into Redtail's room, he saw a strange scene, which made him blurt out. At this time, Redtail was standing aside respectfully, and in her place, a man in a silver robe was sitting. He was also wearing a silver mask, so people couldn't see his face. "Commander," hearing Old Mo's address, the man in the silver robe laughed. "I didn't expect that after so many years, you still remember the organization system of the past. In the Star World, there were 2 commanders in White Mist. This kind of strange address was not very common. It's just a personal hobby." Redtail blinked her eyes and pursed her lips with a smile. Only then did Old Emo and others find that Redtail, who was gloomy before, was now very relaxed and even in the mood to laugh. Then she looked at Old Emo and Bai Xuesheng and said, "Don't be nervous. This is from the headquarters Silver Mask." The man in the silver robe said casually, "Well, Your Excellency, Silver Mask," Redtail said, although they didn't know why the man hid his identity. Since he even had to cover his face, he certainly couldn't reveal his name. Old Emo and Bai Xuesheng next to him looked at the man in the silver robe with a strange expression. It was the first time that they heard that their own organization had a headquarters. If it hadn't come from the commander, no one would have believed it. "Is there a new fog mirror here?" The man in the silver robe was Gu Nan's doppelganger of the saint. He sat quietly on the seat and asked casually. The fog mirror was the product of White Mist translation. By clearing the fog on the fog mirror, it was equivalent to translating the world's will. As long as someone completed the task specified by the world's will, Gu Nan could get a part of the world's origin to build his own private instance. In short, the fog mirror was the real need for him to build White Mist. "Yes, all the fog mirrors are gathered here." Redtail nodded hurriedly. Not only the fog mirrors collected by their reincarnation, but also the ones made in the Crescent World were gathered here. Gunan's holy kingdom was not a heaven or a world plane, so he couldn't directly reincarnate in it. All the previous fog mirrors were brought there by Lan Si. Now it was much easier, as long as Redtail sent someone to reincarnate in the Crescent World and bring the fog mirrors back. "Go and get them," Gunan said matter-of-factly. As soon as his voice fell, an angry voice came from the opposite side. "In front of the enemy, don't you think about how to protect the organization? You only care about the fog mirror." It was Bai Xuesheng who spoke. He looked straight at Gunan without flinching, as if he had to give an explanation. In his family, he had seen too many people who only cared about their own interests and ignored the overall situation. This kind of people were the parasites of the organization. But to his surprise, the man in the silver robe didn't even look at him. Instead, his commander glared at him and said, "You shut up." Before he could speak again, Redtail had turned his hand and took out 2 complete fog mirrors and handed them to Gunan. "There is still 1 plane in the harvesting stage. If it goes well, the harvested luck can be used to make another one." Redtail rejoiced. "Fortunately, we didn't give up here. Otherwise, the collected luck would be wasted." Bai Xuesheng, Old Emo, and the others looked at each other. Then they understood that the commander insisted on staying here for this reason. "Commander, I'm afraid the people from the Flying Cloud territory will arrive soon. Should we make some preparations?" Old Emo pulled Bai Xuesheng behind him and said. He could see that Redtail had left without a doubt, so he could only prepare for the battle. He hoped that the master from the headquarters could be reliable. Of course, He hoped that there were no world breakers in the flying cloud territory. Oldemo thought for a while and said, "As long as there are no world breakers in the flying cloud territory, we still have a battle. There are two." Oldemo didn't expect that the man in the silver robe would speak before the commander spoke. Moreover, he spoke in such a confident tone. Oldemo couldn't help but look a little gloomy. Who could tell the existence of the world breakers? From the information they had heard from all sides, they analyzed that the flying cloud territory was too confident. Maybe they had a backup plan. How could this master who had just come here from the headquarters be so sure? Bai Xuesheng was so angry that he laughed. "How did you know?" Chapter 283. AD on the title began. AD on the title in Dead 1, text chapter 323, the power of a god elite / H1 A style equals color. Hashtag 00F. Ref equals iml. Next chapter / add border equals 0. Trt table border equals 0. Align equals left trt table border equals 0. Align equals left trt table border equals 0. Align equals left trtd /tr /tabular tail gave Gu Nin two coordinates. One of them included the location of Flying Cloud Hill. So Gunan went to Flying Cloud Hill first. It did not matter if there were world breakers or not. He would kill them all first. That would save him a lot of trouble. In Red Tail's room, Bai Xuesheng and the others had already left. They were checking out the situation of Flying Cloud Hill. With Gunan's power, the two fog mirrors could be translated in the blink of an eye. He gave the two white mirrors to Red Tail and said, "I did not kill all the workers in Flying Cloud Hill. Find someone to collect them." Red Tail was shocked, but he quickly reacted. He nodded. His heart was shocked. She thought Gu Nin was expressing his dissatisfaction. He was not happy with the slow completion rate. Although she had not been in the bone world for long, and the workers could only be recruited in the big world, she could not say that out loud. In fact, she was overthinking things. From Gunan's perspective, there was no such thing as good or bad NPCs. Everything was supposed to be like this. As for why he said that, it was because he looked at the private instance dungeon interface. A few of them were almost maxed out. If they worked hard, perhaps they could get a second instance dungeon. Even in the God Kingdom, the private instance dungeons had cooldowns. Now, Guan Hongshen and the others were very familiar with Beautiful World. If they had a new instance dungeon, their points would increase exponentially. Wait, Gunan stopped Red Tail, who was getting ready to go. Are there any world breakers who have nowhere to go, or are they willing to sell themselves? If there were suitable candidates, Gunan did not mind choosing some oracles from the local area. Red Tail looked thoughtful, but after a while, he shook his head. Even in a place as harsh as the Whitebone world, world breakers rarely have nowhere to go. She was speaking the truth. With break world people's ability to enter and exit all the big planes, it was hard for them to be in a desperate situation. No matter how much he offended someone in one place, as long as he didn't die, he could just leave and run to another plane. How many planes were there in the myriad heavens? Perhaps even the 13-star lords didn't know. So where should they start searching? Unless they were targeted by a world-level star lord like Qianhan and had someone like Gunan who could lock down space, they would have no choice but to submit. Otherwise, why would there be so many people willing to be subordinates of people who had reached the break world level? People like the Shanghai Pavilion and Zhua's 5-degree monument were trained from a young age. Their practice had the shadow of the Star Lord, and they had their own businesses in the astral world. That was how they were able to be loyal. Gunan sighed. He had high hopes for the outer sky Xenogeneics. He just had to wait for the two big shots to finish fighting. Red Tail said, "Mister, are you looking for some break world cultivators to stay here?" "Yes." Gunan nodded. The White Mist did not have a break world person to protect it. There would be more problems in the future. He could not come here every time, and he could not make it in time every time. So, Red Tail suggested, "Mister, do you remember that in the Moon World, there are people who are gods of martial arts? They do not have break world power, but if 3 or 4 of them work together, they can fight a break world person." Hearing that, Gunan raised his eyebrows and said, "They are suitable." 3 days later, Gunan was already in the Crescent World. Red Tail had settled the matters in the Bone World and followed him here as well. Mister, the moon world's spirit god has been gathered. Redtail took out a list and gave it to Gunan. Not counting the people we might have missed, we have 15 people under our control. That many? Gunan asked with confusion. He remembered when he first came here, there were only 8 big sections. Each family had one. Now there were that many. Redtail laughed and said, "A few decades have passed in the moon world. We give them better practice methods, and there are no internal conflicts. More and more people have reached Spirit God." Gunan nodded and accepted the list. He did not say anything more. After such a long time, the nature of martial arts Spirit God had been studied. If being a break world person was like a creature going to another level of life, then martial arts Spirit God was like going down the wrong path. Because they did not have the right direction, they went down the wrong path. They could not achieve anything. Becoming a martial arts Spirit God was much easier than becoming a break world person. Their fighting power was not much different, but they did not have the nature of a break world person. They were still human. Their lifespans were not long enough, and they could not do anything about space. But those kinds of people were the best to be protectors. Gunan did not need them to break the world. He only needed them to fight. This group of special fighting powers was something Gunan did not expect. After all, he was a player. He was not an omniscient god. Regarding the moon world, he had only glanced at it. He did not care about it. Redtail had been there for 30 years, so he was more familiar with the place. World Martial Arts Tournament? Gunan glanced at the list briefly, but he saw other words at the back. It was a brief description of the World Martial Arts Conference and the schedule. Even the seeded players had been determined. Redtail smiled and said, "The moon world is full of martial arts. People often argue about who is the world's first warrior. They even rank them. You can see how important this title is to them. Using the title of world's first to lure them here to fight, we can see their actual fighting power. We might even miss some rural masters." Gunan's mind had never been doubted. After Redtail said, "world's first," he immediately understood the benefits. Using this trick to rank these warriors, not only could he find out their details, but it would also be easier to manage them in the future. The treatment of world's first would be better than world's second. If Gunan did it himself, he might not have thought of such an idea. But as his level increased, he paid less and less attention to these little things. This was probably one of the players' problems. When the level was too high, most people were too lazy to follow the guide. They liked to crush them. "Then let's do it." Gunan handed the list to Redtail. "I'll be there to watch the matches after the top 16. I'll pick some people to bring to the upper realm." Bring to the upper realm? Redtail was stunned. He immediately reacted and smiled. "If that's the case, I'm afraid even those old guys hiding in the mountains will come out." Gunan just waved his hand and asked Redtail to prepare more time. He had to capture all the illuminating god realm in the moon world. Chapter 284. The Crescent world was in an uproar. With the World Martial Arts Tournament just around the corner, the Martial Alliance had suddenly announced its postponement. This confused many people, and they were even angry that they had been fooled. But when new news came, it was said that the masters of the upper realms would come to watch and even take some outstanding martial artists to the upper realms. The entire Crescent world fell into a carnival. Actually, in the legends of the Crescent Moon world, the highest realm of the martial Tao had always been the shattering of the void. But in reality, there hadn't been anyone at this level for thousands of years. The last suspected target was a few decades ago, when the world was unified and the Martial Alliance was established. Now, the world was controlled by the Martial Alliance. Of the 8 great sects of the past, there were only 4 left. They had all been taken in by the Alliance. The Zhongli Sword sect, which was the first to side with Gunan, was naturally one of them. It was also the most powerful sect in the Alliance. Within the Zhongli Sword faction, a few young men and women were huddled together in discussion. A white-robed swordsman sat at the head of the table. It was none other than Suwon. Dozens of years had passed, but Suwon still looked young. However, there were some white hairs on his head. "Martial Granduncle, is the recent news true?" Shatter the Void. Someone said excitedly. Could it be that the Alliance spread fake news to attract people to participate? Another girl said. She guessed half of it correctly. Marshal, granduncle. All right, all right. Suwon waved his hand helplessly. I rushed back to the sect just to tell you that it's true. Go and register for the competition immediately. The two men and two women in front of him were Suwon's disciples and grand-disciples. Among the four of them, three had already reached the spirit realm. The Zhongli Sword sect could be considered to have a prosperous population. The moment Suwon finished speaking, the four of them fell silent. Disbelief was written all over their faces. So if it's true, is there really such a thing as breaking through the void in this world? Of course it's real. Suwon smiled and said, a few decades ago, I saw it with my own eyes. If that person really came back, breaking through the void would be a piece of cake. The youngsters were in an uproar again, pestering Suwon for more stories. Suwon did not bring up the matters of the past, only telling them to work hard on their own. I've long since been unable to see through that person's cultivation. Now that you've returned to this world, you're most likely looking for good seedlings. Your chances might be greater than ours. Suwon spoke his conjecture. From his point of view, if Gunan had returned here, it would be for the sake of accepting a disciple. It was impossible that he had taken a fancy to their meager strength. Of course, he didn't know that his guess was right. Of course, the four disciples and grand-disciples did not doubt their martial granduncle's guess. This was the most reasonable situation. Suwon Zhu encouraged the others and then said to the last girl, Xiao, you are the latest to enter the sect, and your cultivation is still a step away from the spirit realm, but your talent is the best. You must fight well this time, understand? Yes, martial granduncle. The girl named Xiao nodded repeatedly, and her voice was still a little childish. Looking at her appearance, she was clearly only 15 or 16 years old, but she was actually close to the peak of martial arts. This talent was indeed enviable. Suwon nodded his head in satisfaction, then sent the four of them back to prepare. After walking out of the room, another girl pulled a Xiao into a conversation. Junior sister Xiao, you have to work hard. The girl said with a chuckle, if you can enter the spirit realm in one fell swoop before the martial arts tournament, your chances will be much higher. Xiao looked somewhat vexed. Senior sister Xiaoqing, I also want to break through, but every time I try to break through that barrier, there seems to be a voice in my heart saying that it's not right. Senior sister Lu Xiaoqing revealed a smug look as she pulled a Xiao forward. Follow me. I'll bring you to find your opportunities. In the middle of the crescent moon world, in the middle of the city that had been renamed Martial Union City, there was a magnificent newly built garden. It was said that this was the place where the Martial Alliance was first established. Now, it had become the headquarters of the Alliance, and it was the sacred land of martial arts in the hearts of all warriors in the world. Senior sister Xiaoqing, where are you taking me? A show had been pulled by Lu Xiaoqing for a long time, and had nearly been seen a few times. They were now in the Martial Alliance's headquarters. The people who lived here were all-important figures in the upper echelons of the Alliance. If they were discovered to have sneaked in, upon thinking of this, a show immediately tried to persuade her bold senior sister, let's quickly return. If we are seen by others, return? Don't you want to break through? Lu Xiaoqing looked exasperated at her for failing to meet her expectations. Breakthrough. Xiao looked at her in a daze. She did not understand what this had to do with her breakthrough. Could it be to seek guidance from the seniors here? But how could any of these seniors compare to her martial grandaunt? As if she could read her thoughts, Lu Xiaoqing smiled mysteriously. In the past, no one could guide you, but now is different. What do you think is the most likely reason for the Alliance's sudden change in attitude? Xiao was naturally intelligent from a young age, so when she heard her senior sister's words, she immediately understood. She said excitedly, definitely that senior who shattered the void has returned. He might even be here. Xiao and Lu Xiaoqing's guess was right. Gunan was indeed here. Not only was he in the Crescent Moon world, he was also very easy to find. In the garden, there was a newly built courtyard that was the largest, most luxurious, and had the air of a nouveau riche. Furthermore, it was placed in the middle of the garden. As long as one was slightly familiar with the Alliance, they would definitely not miss it. The two girls were no exception. They quickly snuck in and immediately heard Lu Shaoqing exclaim, "It's Senior Redtail. I met her with Marshal Grandaunt before." In front of them, a silver-robed man was leisurely lying on a recliner, and Redtail was standing in front of him, reporting something in a low voice. "In that case, that person is—" Ashio cast her gaze on the silver-robed man, but she could not see anything odd about him. He looked like an ordinary person who was sunbathing. Lu Shaoqing got up excitedly and wanted to pull Ashio over to greet him. She believed that with her junior sister's talent and perceptivity, she would definitely catch the eye of that person. If even she could not do it, then no one in the world could. However, at this moment, Ashio suddenly pulled her back and looked around vigilantly. She whispered, "Senior sister, there's someone here." "Someone?" Lu Shaoqing was startled. "Quick, kill her. Kill her, and our mission will be completed. Return immediately, don't stay." "Okay." A conversation sounded behind the two of them, but they could not understand what these words meant. Chapter 285. Be careful. Axiu's senses were sharper than her senior sister's. Almost at the same time that the four people appeared, she had already rushed out and shouted at the same time. The four people who suddenly appeared were faster than Axiu had imagined. It could be seen that each of them had extraordinary skills. Almost in the blink of an eye, they were in front of Redtail. Axiu's eyes revealed a trace of anxiety. Although she was young, she was already very rich in combat experience. At a glance, she could roughly see the realm of the four enemies. None of them were slightly weaker than her. They even seemed to have a joint attack method. It was clear that they were specially trained for assassination. More than half of the world is under the control of the Alliance. Which force can train such assassins? Axiu tried her best to chase forward, but found that she was far behind. She could not help but be shocked. There were four assassins like this, and Senior Redtail did not seem to have reached the realm of divine martial arts. She looked behind her anxiously, hoping that her senior sister could quickly help, but when she turned back, she saw an unfamiliar cold face. "Senior sister," Lu Shaoqing sneered and said disdainfully, "I thought it would take a lot of effort to find the target. I didn't expect it to be so easy. Bringing along a little girl like you as an excuse is really superfluous." Hearing her senior sister's unfamiliar tone, Axiu could not help but feel a chill all over her body. Only then did she understand that these people had followed her, and the reason why her senior sister brought her was to find an excuse in case they were discovered. She was not looking for the legendary senior. She was obviously looking for Senior Redtail. Lu Shaoqing ignored her and just looked ahead. Over there, Redtail had already fallen into the encirclement. The unexpected appearance of a void-breaking powerhouse had indeed disrupted their plan. Otherwise, they would not have been in such a hurry to take action. However, the mission was not completely failed. After all, it was just a powerhouse from this small plane. Their target was only Redtail. As long as they could kill her, it did not matter even if all of them died. However, just as Lu Shaoqing finished her thought, a voice sounded behind her, "Reincarnate?" This time, it was Lu Shaoqing's turn to feel as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. She did not expect that in this small plane, there would actually be someone who knew about reincarnation. Could it be that the so-called void-breaking experts were also reincarnators? She quickly turned around, but what she saw was not the silver robe, but four familiar figures. Her four companions were caught by a shadowy hand and thrown to the ground. Behind them was the expressionless face of the silver-robed man. "Which plane are you from?" he asked unhurriedly. Lu Shaoqing didn't say anything. She just looked at him with a gloomy expression. In any case, she was a reincarnated body, so there was nothing to be afraid of if she died here. It was better to think of a countermeasure. However, Gunan did not intend to wait any longer. With a carefree smile, he stepped on the head of a person on the ground. The head instantly exploded like a watermelon. That person died on the spot, and the wisp of divine soul that was reincarnated was also annihilated at the same time. However, before the divine soul dissipated, its connection with the main world was keenly captured by Gunan. He followed that connection and opened up the space. Soon, He locked the coordinates of the opposite side and said casually, "This is the great martial arts world." Among the heavens and realms, there were a total of more than 100 heaven-level and realm-level main worlds. Their coordinates had long been made public. After finding the coordinates of the opposite side, Gunan only needed to do a little comparison to immediately know what plane it was. Martial arts was probably one of the most popular ways of cultivation in the heavens, and there were even more people than cultivating Taoism. There were even 2 realm-level planes based on martial arts. In order to distinguish them, people called the first one the Great Martial Arts World, and the later ones the Small Martial Arts World. And these people in front of Gu Nan were obviously reincarnators from the Great Martial Arts World who came to this crescent world to carry out a mission. Since Gu Nan went to the astral world, he had been reincarnating into other worlds until he reached the 4th level and was no longer restricted by the plane. Therefore, as half a native, Gunan had never had this kind of strange experience when he met reincarnators. He looked at these people with great interest. Lu Xiaoqing's hands and feet were already cold. Seeing such a scene, how could she not understand? These were not reincarnators. They were obviously powerful people who broke the world. Originally, they were just doing a good mission. Who knew that they would meet such a powerful person? As a reincarnator, Lu Xiaoqing should not be so panicked. However, the deep-rooted fear of the world breakers made her tremble involuntarily. "What is the name of your organization?" Gunan's voice was still calm. Lu Xiaoqing almost said the name of her organization. However, the last bit of reason told her that since the other party was a world breaker, they could not stay for long. With a single thought, she had already directly wiped out that strand of her soul, and her body fell limply to the ground. On the other side, Axiu exclaimed. Redtail also walked over quickly. Gunan was not surprised. Reincarnators at the peak of transcendence were not fools. It was easy for them to understand the situation. The longer they stayed, the more likely it was that the world breakers would find their roots. It was better to return earlier. Unfortunately, this place is too far away. When Redtail saw this, he naturally understood what had happened. He shook his head and sighed. If there were more spiritual souls, we might be able to find out where they came from. Gunan shook his head. He returned to the long lounge chair and looked at the blue sky. No one knew what he was thinking. Redtail did not know what he was thinking, so he did not say much. Instead, he looked at Axiu, smiled, and said, "Little girl, are you also here to assassinate me?" Of course not. Axiu looked like she was saying, "Are you kidding me?" She waved her hand. She told the whole story and kept emphasizing that her senior sister was not a bad person. She must have been possessed by a ghost. In her eyes, her senior sister might just be in a coma. In a sense, her senior sister was indeed possessed by a ghost. However, once the ghost possessed her, there was no chance of recovery. "So, you're here to ask for guidance from the senior?" Redtail reached out and pinched Axiu's cheek. This girl seemed to have an inexplicable affinity, which made it difficult for people to have bad intentions towards her. Axiu nodded quickly and stared at Redtail with her big bright eyes. She could not help but look at Gunan. The scene of the 4 people being taken away by Gunan was still in her mind. She could not even see how he did it. No wonder he was in the void-breaking realm. So, she saw Redtail walk in front of the silver-robed senior and whisper something. She thought that Senior Redtail was helping to persuade him, so her heart was full of hope. Chapter 286. Gunan slowly opened his eyes and looked at Axiu coldly. That kind of indifferent gaze, as if looking down on an ant, made Axiu quite uncomfortable. No one had ever looked at her like that. She felt a little uneasy. She didn't know if it was because of what happened to her senior sister that the senior had a bad impression of her. Of course, she was thinking too much because Gunan looked at everyone like that. Natural child of Providence. Gunan broke away from his original thoughts. With his current knowledge, he naturally had a long understanding of Providence. Providence, to put it bluntly, was not worth mentioning. It was just a manifestation of the plane's will. The plane's will could be manifested, but no one could guarantee that it would be completed. As long as the external force was strong enough, the plane's will could be trampled at will. The translation method of white mist was to guide the planes to create artificial children of providence in a certain area, and then harvest them. Of course, natural children of providence could also be used, and they were ready-made materials. It was shameful to waste them. Let her participate in the martial arts tournament. Make her the world's #1, and let her providence reach the peak. Gunan casually ordered, and soon closed his eyes again. Yes. Redtail nodded, then turned to Axiu, and said with a smile, Master means that as long as you can win the world's #1, he will accept you as his personal disciple. World's #1. After Redtail and Axia left, Gunan lay alone in the courtyard, basking in the lazy afternoon sun, but his mind didn't stop thinking. The appearance of the reincarnators of the great martial arts world made him realize a loophole in his previous thinking. Gunan had always thought that after he adjusted the coordinates of the God Nation several times, no one could find it, but he ignored a possibility: reincarnation. If the God Nation spontaneously spread its will to the outside world and issued tasks, it would be equivalent to spreading the coordinates for no reason. As long as time passed, such a strange plane would be noticed sooner or later. Gunan even suspected that perhaps this was the fundamental reason why the plane and the heaven-level plane were the main world, and other planes could only be reincarnated. When I have time, I must study the nature of the plane will. Gunan frowned slightly. As the construction of the divine kingdom progressed step by step, he felt that he was starting to get busy again. There were more and more things to do in all aspects. It wasn't so troublesome in the game in his previous life. At the end of the day, it was because there were too many living beings and factions in the world, and there were too many experts. After standing the world's warriors up once, the Martial Alliance finally had no intention of doing it again. The #1 martial arts tournament was held as scheduled. Such a grand martial arts event was enough to satisfy the eyes of the world. Countless big shots that one would normally not even get to see were fighting in the ring, using their special skills. Not only the younger generation of the various sects, even an old man like Su, when had personally come out, the title of #1 in the world was something that only they had the qualifications to fight for. With the end of round after round of battles, the situation gradually became clear. The top 16 had already been decided. The martial way was God mode. It was much stronger than an ordinary super. It was like the attack and defense of a break-world person. Even without the support of a rule, it was not something normal people could fight. Hence, at this stage of the martial arts tournament, it was basically a fight between the God mode realm. But there were exceptions. She is indeed someone favored by Providence. Redtail looked at the last name on the list of top 16 and said with satisfaction, in the previous round, Axiu defeated a God mode. Gunan nodded. He had seen that match. Axiu, as a mortal, had used her sword truth, tactics, willpower, and even some geographical advantages to defeat her opponent. It could be said that other than her actual realm, she far exceeded her opponent in every aspect. But that's as far as it goes, right? Even a child of Providence has its limits. Redtail said again. She was considered an expert at playing with Providence. She knew very well what the power of Providence could do. At the very least, it could not allow a person to raise their realm out of thin air. If the person who had gathered the luck was too useless, then the luck would still flow away on its own. Axiu did not have such a problem, but she was born in the Crescent world, so the Providence's power restricted her. The plane itself was warning her that the God mode of martial arts was the wrong path, so she had never been able to break through. The wrong path won't do, but what if it's the right path? Gunan said with a smile. The right path. Redtail looked at Gunan in a daze. She had never thought of using a world breaker as a material for the fog mirror. Even the Qingxiu clan, who had researched this translation method, had never thought of such a crazy idea. Gunan put down Axiu's resume and said casually, her life has been too smooth. How can she use the Providence's power to its fullest? Go help her. Yes. Zhongli's sword sect. Axiu, you are amazing. You actually defeated Elder Qin. A girl about the same age as Axiu said excitedly as she tugged at Axiu's sleeves. Elder Qin was one of the Martial Alliance's elders, and he was the God mode that Axiu had defeated. Axiu only smiled shyly. Her smile was even a bit forced, but it pulled at the wounds on her body. She had used all her strength to barely advance to the top 16, and she was covered in injuries. And the following opponents were all stronger than Elder Qin. It would be extremely difficult to obtain the title of #1 in the world. What was that senior thinking? Axiu could not help but ponder, but before she could figure it out, she heard her companions exclaim, Who are you people? Who allowed you to barge into our Zhongli sword sect?" Axiu looked up in shock and saw that the door had been pushed open at some point in time. A group of people entered in a single file, all of them wearing sneers on their faces. The Zhongli sword sect, Su, one has ill intentions. He sent someone to assassinate the Alliance Lord. We are only acting on orders. Ladies, please do not make things difficult for us. The leader said in a deadpan manner. Nonsense, Axiu's companions berated. Marshal Granduncle is an Alliance elder. How can he send someone to assassinate the Alliance Lord? The leader said coldly, The Alliance will give you justice for this matter. Now, all you need to do is follow us. The girl still wanted to say something, but Axiu's heart turned cold. She had indeed seen Senior Sister, Shaoqing, assassinate Senior Redtail with her own eyes. Could it be that the results of the investigation were Marshal Granduncle? Axiu's thoughts raced. Seeing the other party surging towards her, she could not be bothered to think further. She drew her sword on the spot. The next day, the Martial Alliance announced to the world that the Zhongli sword sect had attempted to assassinate the Alliance Lord. The Alliance had sent troops to suppress them. The main culprit, Su Wan, was killed on the spot. Along with 3 Soul Illumination Realm warriors, the upper echelons of the Zhongli sword sect were all captured. Only Su Wan's most beloved disciple, Axiu, was still on the run. She was wanted by the world. 3 days later, the #1 martial arts tournament officially came to an end. The Venerate Heaven Sect's sect master won the title of #1 in the world. Together with the other 9 Soul Illumination Realm warriors, they were brought to the upper realm by a mysterious senior. It was the envy of countless people. And when the 10 warriors from the Crescent Moon world arrived in the Bone world, Gunan Sagebody had already appeared in the front lines playing Ti Luo Tian.